When the hospital doors won't open and the clock won't stop, how far would you go to save the one person who makes you whole? Tonight, you're about to witness a story of desperation, unexpected grace, and the kind of love that doesn't ask for permission. It just shows up when the world falls apart. This is the story of a father who had nothing left to lose, a woman who had everything but connection, and a little girl whose heartbeat became the rhythm that changed everything. Stay with me until the very end of this journey. If this story touches your heart, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story can travel. Now, let's begin. The fluorescent lights hummed their mechanical lullaby overhead, casting everything in that particular shade of white that exists only in hospitals: sterile, unforgiving, honest. Ethan Cole sat in a plastic chair that had been molded for efficiency rather than comfort, his work boots still caked with the day's dirt, his jacket stained with something he couldn't bring himself to look at too closely. Blood. His daughter's blood. His hands wouldn't stop shaking. He'd pressed them together between his knees, trying to create enough pressure to still them, but they trembled anyway, a betrayal of the calm he was desperately trying to project. Around him, the emergency room moved with organized chaos. Nurses called out codes he didn't understand. Monitors beeped their urgent songs. Somewhere down the hall, someone was crying. Someone else was shouting about insurance cards. But Ethan heard none of it. Not really. All he could hear was the doctor's voice from 20 minutes ago, calm and clinical and completely devastating. "We need consent from both legal guardians before we can proceed with surgery. Your daughter is stable for now, but we're working against the clock here, Mr. Cole. We need to reach your ex-wife." Ethan had explained, his voice steady at first, then cracking, then breaking entirely, that his ex-wife, Rebecca, had walked out of their lives 3 years ago. That the last address he had for her was 2 states away and 8 months old. That her phone number redirected to a disconnected message. That he was the only parent Lily had known for years, the only one who packed her lunches and knew she was afraid of thunderstorms, and remembered that she liked her pancakes with the chocolate chips arranged in a smiley face. None of it mattered. Policy was policy. Legal guardian meant legal guardian, plural, when the paperwork said plural. And right now, his daughter was lying on a gurney somewhere beyond those double doors, her small body broken in ways he couldn't let himself imagine, while bureaucracy stood between her and the surgery that could save her life. The accident played on repeat behind his eyes. He'd been 3 cars behind when it happened, had watched the pickup truck run the red light, watched it slam into the passenger side of the sedan where Lily sat in her booster seat, coming home from her best friend's birthday party. He'd seen the impact, metal crumpling like paper, glass exploding into diamond rain, the sedan spinning once, twice, before slamming into a telephone pole. He'd run. Left his own truck in the middle of the intersection and just ran, screaming her name. When he'd reached her, she'd been conscious, barely. Blood running down her face from a gash above her eyebrow, her arm bent wrong, her eyes unfocused. "Daddy?" she'd whispered, and the word had nearly destroyed him. "Daddy, I can't feel my legs." Now 2 hours later, sitting in this hell disguised as a waiting room, Ethan felt every second tick by like a countdown to catastrophe. The doctors had stabilized her. They'd stopped the external bleeding, set the obvious brakes. But there was internal bleeding they needed to address, swelling in her spine that needed immediate intervention, and without that second signature, without Rebecca's consent, they were handcuffed by hospital policy and legal liability. Ethan had begged. He'd actually gotten down on his knees in front of the hospital administrator and begged. It hadn't mattered. "Mr. Cole," the woman had said, her voice professionally sympathetic, "I understand your situation, I truly do, but if we proceed without proper consent and something goes wrong, the hospital could face criminal charges, the doctors could lose their licenses. I'm sorry, but we have to follow protocol." Protocol. As if his daughter's life was a box to be checked, a form to be filed in triplicate. He'd tried calling Rebecca again, and again, and again. Each time the same automated message: "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." He'd called her mother, who he hadn't spoken to in 2 years. No answer. He'd called her sister, who told him she hadn't heard from Rebecca in months, and hung up before he could explain why he was asking. He'd even called her old job, desperate enough to think maybe someone there might have a forwarding address, a new phone number, anything, but they told him Rebecca hadn't worked there in over a year. She'd vanished, as completely as if she'd never existed at all. And somewhere in this building, Lily was paying the price for her mother's disappearing act. Ethan pressed his palms against his eyes, hard enough to see stars. He was so tired, not just from today, though the adrenaline was wearing off and leaving him hollowed out. He was tired from 3 years of being both parents, both breadwinners, both comforter and disciplinarian, teacher and playmate, the one who kissed, scraped knees, and the one who enforced bedtimes. He was tired from the overtime shifts at the construction site, the macaroni dinners, the parent-teacher conferences he attended alone while other kids had 2 people in their corner. But more than that, he was tired of being powerless. When Rebecca left, he'd been powerless to stop her. He'd come home from work to find half the apartment empty and a note on the kitchen counter, 3 sentences that had rewritten his entire world. I can't do this anymore. I'm sorry. Don't try to find me. He'd been powerless when Child Protective Services had shown up a month later, responding to an anonymous call claiming he was neglecting Lily. He'd watched a social worker inspect their home, interview his daughter, review his employment records, all while he stood there with his heart in his throat, terrified they'd take her away. They hadn't. He'd passed their investigation, but the fear had never fully left. He'd been powerless when Lily had asked, over and over during those first 6 months, when Mommy was coming home. What could he say? How do you explain abandonment to a 5-year-old? He'd settled on, Mommy needed to go away for a while, which felt like a lie and the truth at the same time. And now, tonight, in this emergency room that smelled like disinfectant and desperation, he was powerless again. His daughter needed him, and he couldn't help her. Couldn't sign a form, couldn't give permission, couldn't do the one thing that mattered because of a signature he didn't have and a woman he couldn't find. The rage that flared up surprised him with its heat. He stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the linoleum, and paced to the window. Outside, the city glittered with indifference. Cars moved through streets. People walked dogs. Life continued, uncaring, while his daughter lay broken and waiting. How dare Rebecca do this? Not just leave. People left. He understood that. He'd even come to accept it. But to leave so completely that she couldn't be reached even now, even for this, even when Lily's life hung in the balance. What kind of person did that? What kind of mother disappeared so thoroughly that her own child could die waiting for a signature? Ethan's reflection in the window showed him a man he barely recognized. When had he gotten so old? The lines around his eyes had deepened. Gray had started threading through his dark hair at the temples. He was 32 years old and he looked 40. 3 years of solo parenting had aged him in ways he hadn't noticed until this moment. Mr. Cole? He turned to find a nurse standing there, young, with kind eyes. His heart stopped. Is she still stable? The nurse said quickly, reading his panic. Dr. Morrison asked me to update you. We've managed to slow the internal bleeding, but it's not stopped. He wants you to know that we're doing everything we can while we wait for consent, but she hesitated, choosing her words carefully. Time is becoming a critical factor. Translation. His daughter was dying politely, professionally, by degrees. How long? His voice sounded like gravel. I can't give you an exact timeline, but Dr. Morrison is very concerned about the spinal swelling. The longer we wait, the higher the risk of permanent damage. Permanent damage. Paralysis. His little girl who loved to run, who did cartwheels in the backyard, who climbed everything she could reach. She might never walk again because of bureaucracy and a missing signature. Thank you, Ethan managed, and the nurse gave him a look of such genuine sympathy that it almost broke him. When she left, he sank back into the chair. The waiting room had filled up since he'd arrived. A teenage boy with a bloody nose, probably from a fight. An elderly man clutching his chest while his wife filled out paperwork. A mother with a feverish toddler draped across her lap. All of them caught in their own private emergencies, their own desperate moments. Ethan checked his phone again. No messages, no missed calls. He pulled up Rebecca's contact. He'd never deleted it, though he'd thought about it 1,000 times, and tried again. The number you have dialed is no longer in service. He wanted to throw the phone across the room, wanted to scream, wanted to punch something until his knuckles bled and the pain in his hands matched the pain in his chest. But he didn't. He just sat there, this man who'd built houses for a living, who could frame a wall and run electrical and fix just about anything that broke. And he couldn't fix this. Couldn't build a solution. Couldn't construct a way out. Lily's 8th birthday had been 2 months ago. He'd scraped together overtime money for a new bike. Purple, her favorite color, with streamers on the handlebars and a basket on the front. She'd cried when she'd seen it. Happy tears. The kind that made everything worth it. "Best birthday ever, Daddy," she'd said, throwing her arms around his neck. "You're the best daddy in the whole world." He'd held her tight, this little person who'd become his entire universe, and thought, "I'd give you anything, everything, whatever you need." But he hadn't anticipated this, hadn't prepared for the one moment when what she needed was something he couldn't provide. The overhead television in the waiting room was playing the news on mute. Ethan watched the images flicker past without really seeing them. Weather forecast, sports scores, some political scandal. The world kept spinning. How was that possible? How could everything just continue when his daughter was... "Excuse me." The voice was quiet, cultured, touched with an accent he couldn't quite place. Maybe old money Southern, maybe East Coast educated. Ethan looked up. A woman stood beside his row of chairs. She was probably in her early 50s, though she was one of those women who aged gracefully, wearing it like a choice rather than a surrender. Her silver gray hair was pulled back in a neat twist. She wore a charcoal cashmere coat over what looked like expensive clothes, the kind that didn't advertise their cost but somehow communicated it anyway. Her face was composed, but her eyes were red-rimmed, as if she'd been crying recently and had carefully repaired the damage. "Is this seat taken?" she asked, gesturing to the chair beside him. The waiting room was half empty. There were at least a dozen open seats scattered around, but Ethan just shook his head, too exhausted to question why she'd choose to sit next to a stranger. She settled into the chair with practiced elegance, setting her handbag, genuine leather, he noted distantly, on the floor beside her. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The waiting room hummed around them. A janitor pushed a mop across the far end of the floor. The television flickered its silent stories. Then the woman said, very quietly, "You're waiting for someone." It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. "My daughter." His voice cracked on the word. "She was in an accident, car crash. They won't..." He stopped, swallowed. "They need consent to operate, and I can't... My ex-wife, she's not..." He couldn't finish. Couldn't explain the nightmare logistics of his situation to this stranger. But when he looked over, he saw something unexpected in her expression. Not pity, understanding. As if she knew exactly what it felt like to be helpless in a hospital, waiting for news that might never come. "My husband died here," she said, 2 years ago. Heart attack. They did everything they could, but..." She trailed off, her gaze distant. "I sat in a chair very much like that one, waiting for a doctor to tell me he'd survived. And when the doctor finally came, when she told me he was gone, I remember thinking, what do I do with all this waiting I just did? Where does it go?" Ethan didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. "I'm Margaret," the woman said, extending a hand. "Margaret Hale." "Ethan Cole." He shook her hand. Her grip was firm, confident. Another silence settled between them, but it felt different now. Less isolating. Margaret pulled a tissue from her purse and dabbed at her eyes, though no fresh tears had fallen. "I come here sometimes," she admitted. "To the hospital. I sit in the waiting rooms, or I walk the halls, or I visit the chapel downstairs. My therapist says it's unhealthy, that I'm trying to recreate the last place I saw him alive. But the truth is, I understand these places. The waiting, the fear, the fluorescent lights, and the smell of disinfectant, and the way time moves differently inside hospitals." She looked at Ethan directly. The loneliness. The word hit him like a physical blow. Loneliness. Yes, that was exactly what this was. He'd been alone in his fear since the moment he'd pulled Lily from that wrecked car. Alone when he'd ridden with her in the ambulance. Alone when he'd given the admission staff her information and realized he couldn't list an emergency contact besides himself. Alone when the doctor had explained about needing dual consent and his world had fractured along fault lines he hadn't known existed. "She's 8 years old," Ethan heard himself saying. Her name is Lily. She loves purple and strawberry ice cream, and she wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up because she thinks every animal deserves someone who understands them." His voice shook. "And she's in there dying because I can't find her mother and I'm supposed to protect her. That's my job, my only job that actually matters, and I can't." The sob that tore out of him was unexpected, raw. He covered his face with his hands, shoulders shaking, and wept. Right there in the middle of the emergency room waiting area, surrounded by strangers and suffering, Ethan Cole broke apart. He felt a hand on his shoulder, light, tentative. Margaret's touch. "You're not powerless," she said softly. "Not as powerless as you feel right now." "I can't sign the form," he managed through his tears. "They won't let me. My signature isn't enough." "Then we find another way." He looked up at her through blurred vision. "What other way?" "I've tried everything. I can't reach Rebecca. I've called everyone I can think of. The hospital won't budge on their policy. There is no other way." Margaret's expression shifted. Something sharpened in her eyes, a kind of determination he recognized from his own mirror on his best days, the look of someone who'd decided to fight. "Mr. Cole, Ethan, I'm going to ask you a question, and I need you to answer honestly. Is there any part of you that believes Lily's mother would withhold consent if she could be reached? Any reason to think she wouldn't want the surgery to proceed?" He shook his head immediately. "No. Rebecca had her faults, but she loved Lily. I know she did. She wouldn't, if she knew, she'd sign. Of course she'd sign." "Then the issue isn't consent. The issue is communication and documentation." Margaret stood, picking up her handbag. "Wait here." "Where are you?" But she was already walking toward the admission desk, her posture straight, her stride purposeful. Ethan watched as she approached the harried-looking administrator behind the counter, the same woman who'd explained policy to him an hour ago. He couldn't hear what Margaret was saying, but he could see the transformation in the administrator's body language. The defensive crossed arms softening, the dismissive expression shifting to attention. Margaret pulled something from her purse, a business card maybe, or identification, and placed it on the counter. The administrator looked at it, then at Margaret, then picked up a phone. 5 minutes later, a man in a suit appeared. Hospital administrator, Ethan guessed, or maybe legal counsel. Margaret spoke to him with the same calm authority. The man listened, nodded, made a call on his cell phone. 10 minutes after that, Margaret returned to Ethan. "Dr. Morrison will be out in a moment," she said simply. How did you? I explained the situation to the hospital's legal team and offered to assume financial and legal responsibility for proceeding with the surgery under emergency circumstances. I've agreed to indemnify the hospital against liability, and my attorneys are sending over documentation that will allow you to proceed as sole consenting guardian given the circumstances. Ethan stared at her. "You can't just... That's not... Who are you?" She smiled, and it was sad and knowing and kind all at once. Someone who understands what it's like to feel powerless, and someone who has resources she rarely knows what to do with. She sat back down beside him. "I've also made some calls to have a private investigator begin searching for Rebecca. If she's findable, we'll find her. But in the meantime, Lily gets the surgery she needs. I can't let you pay for..." "Mr. Cole, Ethan, we can argue about payment and pride later. Right now I need you to focus on one thing. Would you like the surgery to proceed?" It wasn't even a question. "Yes, God, yes." "Then let's make that happen." Before Ethan could process what was occurring, Dr. Morrison appeared, still in his surgical scrubs, looking cautiously optimistic. "Mr. Cole, I understand we've had some developments regarding consent?" Ethan looked at Margaret, who nodded encouragingly. "We have documentation being sent over that will allow us to proceed," Dr. Morrison continued. "I'm going to need you to sign some additional forms, and there's still risk. I won't lie to you about that. But we can move forward with the surgery immediately." The relief that flooded through Ethan was so intense, it left him dizzy. "How soon?" "We're prepping her now. 20 minutes and we'll be underway." Dr. Morrison glanced at Margaret, then back to Ethan. "Your daughter is very lucky to have people who care about her this much." After the doctor left, Ethan turned to Margaret. She was collecting her things, preparing to leave, and suddenly the thought of her walking away felt impossible. "Stay," he said. Please, I don't, I can't be alone right now. Margaret hesitated, her expression shifting through several emotions too quick to name. Then she set her handbag back down and settled into the chair. Of course, she said quietly. Of course I'll stay. And so they waited together. Two strangers connected by crisis and hospitals and the specific loneliness that comes from loving people you might lose. Margaret told him about her husband, Richard, who'd been a professor of literature and who'd proposed to her in a library between the stacks of Victorian novels. Ethan told her about Lily, about the way she insisted on reading bedtime stories to her stuffed animals every night, about how she'd taught herself to make scrambled eggs so she could surprise him with breakfast in bed on Father's Day. Time moved differently with company. The minutes still crawled, but they were bearable now, shared. When the nurse came to tell him the surgery had begun, Ethan felt Margaret's hand find his and squeeze. He squeezed back, holding on to this lifeline he hadn't known he needed. She's going to be okay, Margaret said. Not a question, a declaration. Ethan wanted to believe her, wanted to trust that the universe wouldn't be cruel enough to bring him this close to salvation only to snatch it away. But he'd learned not to trust the universe. He'd learned that bad things happened to people who didn't deserve them, that mothers walked away, that cars ran red lights, that paperwork could stand between life and death. All he could do was hold Margaret's hand and wait and hope that maybe, just maybe, this time would be different. The surgery took 4 hours, 4 hours of pacing and sitting and standing and pacing again, of terrible coffee from vending machines and updates from nurses that said nothing and everything, of Margaret making phone calls to her attorneys, to the private investigator, to someone she called Charles, who seemed to handle her practical affairs, of Ethan replaying the accident over and over, wondering if there was something he could have done differently, some way he could have prevented this. At hour 2, Margaret ordered food to be delivered to the hospital. Real food, not cafeteria sandwiches. She insisted Ethan eat something, standing over him like a benevolent prison guard until he'd finished at least half the sandwich she'd handed him. You'll be no good to Lily if you collapse, she'd said, and he'd been too tired to argue. At hour 3, Ethan's phone rang. Unknown number. His heart leapt. Maybe it was Rebecca, maybe someone had found her, but it was just the auto shop calling about his truck, which was apparently still sitting in the middle of the intersection where he'd abandoned it. He gave them permission to tow it and hung up, feeling foolish for hoping. At hour 3.5, Margaret excused herself to the restroom and returned with fresh makeup, looking considerably more composed than she had when she'd first sat down. But her eyes kept returning to Ethan with an expression he couldn't quite read. Concern, certainly. But something else, too. Something that looked almost like recognition, as if she saw something in him that resonated with her own experience. Finally, at 11:47 p.m., Ethan would remember that exact time for the rest of his life. Dr. Morrison emerged from the surgical wing. He looked exhausted, but not defeated, and that was enough to make Ethan's knees weak with relief. The surgery went well, Doctor, Morrison said, and Ethan actually felt his heart restart. We've stopped the internal bleeding and addressed the spinal swelling. There was some damage to the L4 vertebra, but we were able to stabilize it. She's in recovery now. Will she? Ethan couldn't finish the question. Walk? Dr. Morrison nodded. Too early to say for certain, but I'm cautiously optimistic. The intervention was timely enough that I don't believe there's been permanent nerve damage. She'll need extensive physical therapy, and recovery will take months, but I see no reason why she shouldn't make a full recovery. Ethan's legs gave out. He didn't fall. Margaret caught him, her arm around his waist, supporting his weight until he could stand on his own again. When can I see her? He managed. She'll be in recovery for another hour or so, then we'll move her to the ICU. You can see her briefly once she's settled, but she'll be unconscious until morning at least. The anesthesia will take time to wear off. Can he stay with her? Margaret asked. Dr. Morrison looked surprised by the question, then at Ethan's face, then nodded. I'll arrange for a chair in her room. Standard ICU policy is limited visitation, but given the circumstances, he trailed off meaningfully. After the doctor left, Ethan turned to Margaret. He wanted to thank her, to express the magnitude of what she'd done, but words seemed insufficient. Instead, he just pulled her into a hug. She stiffened for a moment, clearly not someone accustomed to spontaneous physical affection, then relaxed into it, her arms coming up to return the embrace. "Thank you," Ethan whispered against her shoulder. "Thank you doesn't even begin to cover it, but thank you." When they pulled apart, Margaret's eyes were wet again. She brushed at them impatiently. "I didn't do anything so extraordinary," she said. "I just made some phone calls." "You saved her life." "No, the doctors saved her life. I just cleared some obstacles." But she looked pleased despite her protestations. They settled back into their chairs to wait for the next update. The waiting room had emptied considerably, just them and an elderly couple dozing in the corner. On the television, the late-night news had given way to infomercials. The hospital had that particular middle-of-the-night quality, hushed and liminal, like the whole world was holding its breath. "Margaret," Ethan said quietly, "I don't know how I'm ever going to repay you for this." She turned to look at him, her expression serious. "You don't owe me anything, Ethan, truly. But if you're determined to see this as a debt—" She paused, considering. "Then repay me by letting me be part of her recovery, by letting me check in on you both, by not shutting me out when this immediate crisis passes." It was a strange request. They'd known each other for only hours. But Ethan understood what she was really asking. Don't let me disappear back into my loneliness. Don't let this connection we've made tonight dissolve like it never happened. "Deal," he said, and meant it. At 1:15 a.m., a nurse came to tell him Lily had been moved to the ICU, and he could see her now. Margaret stood when he did. "Do you want—" he began. "No," she said gently. "This moment is yours. Go be with your daughter. I'll be here when you need to come up for air." Ethan nodded gratefully and followed the nurse through the maze of hospital corridors to the ICU. The unit was quiet, all dimmed lights and beeping monitors. The nurse led him to room 7 and pushed open the door. Lily looked impossibly small in the hospital bed. Tubes and wires connected her to machines that blinked and hummed. Her right arm was in a cast. Bandages wrapped around her head. Her face was bruised, swollen, barely recognizable. But she was breathing. Her chest rose and fell with steady rhythm. And when Ethan took her small hand in his, her fingers were warm. He sank into the chair beside her bed and wept again. But this time from relief instead of despair. His daughter was alive. Against every obstacle, against policy and paperwork and missing signatures, she was alive. "Hey, baby girl," he whispered, stroking her hand. "Daddy's here. I'm right here, and I'm not going anywhere." Outside the room, through the small window in the door, he could see the nurses' station, the other ICU rooms, the controlled chaos of critical care. But in this small space, it was just the two of them, father and daughter. The family they'd built from the wreckage of the one they'd lost. Ethan didn't know what came next, didn't know how he'd pay Margaret back, or when Rebecca might resurface, or how he'd manage Lily's recovery while keeping up with work. Those were problems for tomorrow, for next week, for the uncertain future. Tonight, right now, Lily was alive. And that was enough. That was everything. He settled back in this uncomfortable chair, still holding his daughter's hand, and watched her breathe. Watched the monitors trace her heartbeat in green light. Watched the IV drip medication into her veins that would keep her comfortable, keep her healing. And for the first time since the accident, Ethan Cole allowed himself to hope. Not just that Lily would recover, though he hoped for that with every fiber of his being, but that maybe, just maybe, they weren't as alone in this world as he'd thought. That maybe there were still people who showed up when you needed them. That maybe kindness from strangers wasn't always kindness from strangers. Sometimes it was the beginning of something more. In the waiting room, Margaret Hale sat in her chair and stared at nothing. Her phone had buzzed several times with messages from Charles, checking if she needed anything, if she was all right. She'd ignored them all. She wasn't sure how to explain what had happened tonight, how sitting in that waiting room chair had transported her back 2 years to her own vigil, her own desperate hope. How seeing Ethan's face, that particular expression of helpless love, had shattered something in her chest she'd thought was safely sealed away. How for the first time since Richard had died, she'd felt useful, necessary, connected to something beyond her own grief. She'd meant what she'd said about wanting to be part of Lily's recovery, about not being shut out. But what she hadn't said, what she barely admitted to herself, was how desperately she needed this. Needed them. Needed a reason to care about something, someone, beyond the empty rooms of her too large house and the charitable galas where everyone knew her name but no one really knew her. Margaret pulled out her phone and texted Charles. Found something tonight. Or maybe it found me. Either way, I'm going to need you to clear some time in my schedule. I have a feeling I'm going to be busy for a while. His response came immediately. Whatever you need, Mrs. Hale. She smiled at the phone, then stood and walked to the window overlooking the parking lot. Dawn was still hours away. The city sparkled in the darkness, all those lives intersecting and diverging, connecting and breaking apart. Somewhere in this building, a little girl named Lily was fighting to heal. And somewhere else, her father was keeping vigil, holding on to hope with both hands. And here, in this waiting room that had seen so much suffering and so many small miracles, Margaret Hale made a decision. She wasn't going to walk away from this. From them. Not now. Maybe not ever. Whatever came next, and she was practical enough to know it wouldn't all be simple or easy. She was in. Fully. Completely. Because sometimes the strongest families aren't born. Sometimes they're chosen. Sometimes they're built from broken pieces in hospital waiting rooms at 1 a.m. when two lonely people decide that maybe they don't have to be lonely anymore. And sometimes that's enough to change everything. Morning light crept through the ICU windows like an unwelcome guest, exposing the harsh reality that darkness had mercifully obscured. Ethan hadn't slept. He'd sat in that chair all night, holding Lily's hand, watching her chest rise and fall, counting each breath like a prayer answered. His back ached, his eyes burned, his clothes still carried the smell of antiseptic and fear. But his daughter was alive. Around 6 a.m., a nurse had come in to check Lily's vitals. A different one from the night shift, younger, with a bright efficiency that felt almost offensive in its cheerfulness. She'd smiled at Ethan, said something about how kids were resilient, how Lily's numbers looked good. He'd nodded, unable to form words, and she'd left them alone again. At 7, Dr. Morrison appeared, looking considerably more rested than he had the night before. He examined Lily thoroughly, checked her chart, made notes that Ethan couldn't decipher. Everything looks stable, the doctor said finally. Better than stable, actually. Her body is responding well to the treatment. The swelling in her spine has decreased significantly overnight. When will she wake up? Ethan's voice was hoarse from disuse. Could be any time in the next few hours. We've reduced the sedation. Her body will wake up when it's ready. Dr. Morrison paused, his expression softening. You should get some rest yourself, Mr. Cole. There's a family waiting area with couches. You could... I'm not leaving her. The doctor didn't argue. I'll have the nurses bring you some coffee and breakfast, if you can manage it. After he left, Ethan leaned forward, resting his forehead against the cool metal of Lily's bed rail. His mind felt sluggish, thoughts moving through mud. He should call his supervisor, let them know he wouldn't be at the construction site today, or tomorrow, or however long it took. He should figure out what happened to his truck, should check if there were any messages, any miraculous contact from Rebecca. Should. The word had lost all meaning. A soft knock at the door made him look up. Margaret stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee from what was clearly not the hospital cafeteria. She'd changed clothes, gone home at some point during the early morning hours, and returned wearing different slacks, a cream-colored sweater that looked impossibly soft. I thought you might need this, she said, offering him one of the cups. It's from the cafe 3 blocks over. Their coffee is actually drinkable. Ethan took it gratefully, the warmth seeping into his cold hands. You didn't have to come back. I know. She moved into the room slowly, carefully, as if afraid of intruding. Her eyes went to Lily, and something flickered across her face, pain, recognition, something Ethan couldn't quite name. How is she? Stable. The doctor says she could wake up soon. He sipped the coffee. It was perfect. Strong, slightly sweet, exactly what he needed. Thank you for this, for last night, for everything. Margaret settled into the second chair someone had brought in during the night. You're going to wear out that phrase if you're not careful. I don't know what else to say. Then don't say anything. She cradled her own coffee, her gaze steady on Lily's sleeping form. I had a daughter once, she said quietly, and the words landed between them like stones in still water. Ethan's breath caught. Had? Miscarriage. 23 years ago. I was 4 months along. We'd already picked out names, painted the nursery. Her voice remained steady, but her knuckles whitened around the coffee cup. Sarah, we were going to call her. Sarah Elizabeth Hale. Margaret, I never got to hold her, she continued, as if she hadn't heard him. Never got to see her face, hear her cry, watch her sleep. Never got any of it. She turned to look at Ethan, and her eyes were dry but devastated. So when I say I understand what you're feeling right now, that terror of potentially losing your child, I need you to know I'm not just offering empty sympathy. Ethan didn't know how to respond to that kind of honesty, so he just reached over and squeezed her hand, the same way she'd squeezed his the night before. They sat in silence for a while, drinking their coffee, watching Lily breathe. Outside the room, the ICU came fully alive with the day shift, doctors making rounds, nurses changing shifts, the mechanical beeps and hums of 24 machines keeping 24 people alive. I tried again, Margaret said eventually. Had more children, I mean. After Sarah, Richard and I tried for years. Fertility treatments, specialists, everything money could buy. She smiled, but it was bitter. Turns out some things money can't fix. We never conceived again. I'm sorry. Don't be. We had a good life, Richard and I, full of other things, travel, his work, my charity projects. We made peace with it. She paused. Or I thought we had. But then he died, and I realized how quiet the house was. How empty. No children to call, no grandchildren to visit, just me and the echo of all the things we'd planned but never gotten to have. Before Ethan could respond, Lily stirred. Just a small movement, her fingers twitching in his hand, but it was enough to make his heart leap. Lily? He leaned forward. Baby, can you hear me? Her eyelids fluttered. A soft sound escaped her lips, not quite a word. I'll get the nurse, Margaret said, already standing, already moving. Dr. Morrison and 2 nurses arrived within minutes. They crowded around the bed, checking monitors, shining lights in Lily's eyes, asking her questions she wasn't quite awake enough to answer. Ethan was gently pushed back, given space to let them work, and he stood there feeling useless again, watching strangers touch his daughter with practiced efficiency. Finally, Lily's eyes opened fully, confused, frightened, searching, until they found Ethan. Daddy? Her voice was barely a whisper, rough from the breathing tube they'd removed during the night. I'm here, sweetheart. Right here. He pushed past the nurses, not caring about protocol, and took her hand again. You're okay. You're going to be okay. It hurts. Tears spilled down her cheeks. I know, baby, I know. But the doctors are helping. They're making you better. Dr. Morrison stepped in smoothly. Lily, my name is Dr. Morrison. You were in an accident, but you're in the hospital now, and we're taking very good care of you. Can you tell me where it hurts? Everywhere, she whimpered. The doctor adjusted something on her IV, and within moments, Lily's face relaxed slightly. That's medicine to help with the pain, he explained. Lily, I need you to try something for me. Can you wiggle your toes? Ethan held his breath. This was the moment. This would tell them if... Under the thin hospital blanket, Lily's feet moved. Small movements, but definite, deliberate. Good, Dr. Morrison said, and Ethan could have wept from relief. That's very good. Now your fingers? She squeezed Ethan's hand weakly. The doctor smiled. Excellent. You're doing great, Lily. Now I want you to rest. Your dad is going to stay right here with you, and we're going to keep checking on you, okay? Lily nodded, her eyes already drooping again. The medication was pulling her back under. Daddy? She mumbled. Don't leave. Never, he promised. I'm not going anywhere. She fell back asleep holding his hand. After the medical team left, assuring Ethan that her response had been very encouraging, Margaret spoke from her corner of the room. She's beautiful, she said softly. She has your eyes. Ethan looked at his daughter, at the bruises that would fade, the cuts that would heal, the small body that had proven itself stronger than he dared to hope. She's everything, he said simply. Over the next few days, a routine established itself. Lily would wake for short periods, confused and hurting, and Ethan would be there, explaining again what had happened, promising again that she'd be okay. The doctors were pleased with her progress. The swelling continued to decrease. Her cognitive functions were sharp. She knew her name, her age, her father, could answer questions about school, and her favorite things. The physical damage would heal. That was the consensus. And through it all, Margaret was there. She brought coffee every morning from that cafe 3 blocks away. She sat with Ethan during the long hours when Lily slept. She made phone calls in the hallway. Ethan didn't know to whom or about what, but things kept getting easier in small ways. The hospital billing department stopped calling. A social worker appeared offering resources he hadn't known existed. Someone from victim services helped him file the police report about the accident, explaining his rights regarding the other driver's insurance. Margaret's doing, all of it. He knew that without being told. On the 3rd day, Lily was awake enough to notice the stranger in the room. "Who's that?" she asked Ethan, eyeing Margaret with the particular suspicion of children encountering new adults. "This is Margaret," Ethan said. "She's a friend. She helped you after the accident." "Helped how?" Margaret answered before Ethan could. "I made sure the doctors could take care of you right away," she said simply, moving closer to the bed. "And I've been keeping your dad company while you sleep. He gets lonely." Lily considered this. "Daddy doesn't have many friends," she said with the brutal honesty of 8-year-olds. "Lily," Ethan protested, embarrassed. But Margaret laughed, the first real laugh Ethan had heard from her. "Well, he has one now," she said, "if that's all right with you." "Do you like purple?" Lily asked. "I do," Margaret said seriously. "It's a very dignified color." "And strawberry ice cream?" "One of life's great pleasures." Lily smiled, and Ethan felt something shift in his chest. "Okay," his daughter declared, "you can be Daddy's friend." From that moment, Margaret became a fixture in Lily's recovery. She was there when the physical therapist came to begin gentle range of motion exercises. There when Lily cried from the pain of moving muscles and bones that didn't want to cooperate. There with quiet encouragement and sometimes just silent presence. She brought books, chapter books, the kind Lily was just getting old enough to appreciate. She read to her in a clear, expressive voice, doing different accents for different characters, making Lily giggle even through her discomfort. She brought her iPad loaded with movies and games, but carefully chosen ones. Nothing too intense, nothing that might frighten a child who just survived trauma. And slowly, impossibly, the 3 of them began to feel like something more than strangers united by crisis. They felt like people who belonged together. Ethan tried not to examine that feeling too closely. Tried not to wonder what would happen when Lily was discharged, when the immediate emergency passed, when real life resumed. Margaret had her own life, a big one clearly, full of resources and responsibilities, and whatever it was wealthy widows did with their time. This was temporary. An interlude. She'd said she wanted to be part of Lily's recovery, but that didn't mean forever. It couldn't mean forever. Could it? On day 5, Lily was moved from ICU to a regular pediatric room. It felt like graduation, like progress, like hope taking solid form. The new room had a window that actually opened, letting in fresh air for the first time since the accident. It had a television mounted on the wall. It had a second bed that folded out from the chair, so Ethan could finally sleep lying down instead of hunched over in an uncomfortable seat. Margaret helped them move Lily's things, the books, an iPad, the stuffed elephant Ethan had grabbed from home, the cards from Lily's classmates that had started arriving once word spread about the accident. "You should go home," Margaret said to Ethan once Lily was settled. "Take a shower, sleep in a real bed. I'll stay with her." "I can't. Ethan." She gave him a look that was pure steel wrapped in velvet. "You haven't left this hospital in 5 days. You smell like a locker room, you're wearing the same clothes from the night of the accident, and you're about to collapse. Go home. Take care of yourself for a few hours. I promise I won't let anything happen to her." Lily piped up from her bed. "You do smell kind of bad, Daddy." Even Ethan had to laugh at that. "Traitor," he said fondly. "I'll call you if anything changes," Margaret promised. "But nothing is going to change. The The crisis has passed. She's healing. Let yourself breathe for a minute. He looked between them, his daughter, already comfortable with this woman who'd been a stranger less than a week ago, and Margaret herself, standing there with such calm certainty. When had she become someone he trusted completely? He couldn't pinpoint the moment. It had happened gradually, then all at once. Okay, he conceded, but just a few hours. Take as long as you need, Margaret said. Home felt like a foreign country. Ethan stood in the doorway of his apartment, modest on the third floor of a building that had seen better decades, and felt like an intruder in his own life. Everything looked exactly as he'd left it the morning of Lily's friend's birthday party. Breakfast dishes still in the sink, Lily's backpack by the door. The permission slip for her upcoming field trip still on the refrigerator, unsigned. A week ago. Just a week ago, his biggest worry had been whether he could swap shifts to chaperone that field trip. Now his daughter was in the hospital, learning to walk again. Now a wealthy stranger had paid her medical bills and was sitting in a pediatric room reading Harry Potter aloud in funny voices. Now his entire life had been picked up, shaken like a snow globe, and set back down in a completely different configuration. Ethan showered, changed clothes, made himself a sandwich he barely tasted, checked his phone. Still nothing from Rebecca, though he'd stopped expecting anything. The private investigator Margaret had hired had sent regular updates. They'd traced Rebecca to Nevada 6 months ago, but the trail went cold after that. She'd changed her name, possibly left the country. She didn't want to be found. Fine. They didn't need her anyway. He tried to sleep in his own bed but couldn't manage it. The apartment was too quiet without Lily's presence. Too empty. After an hour of staring at the ceiling, Ethan gave up, grabbed a duffel bag, and packed enough clothes for a proper hospital stay. If Margaret could essentially move into Lily's room, so could he. When he returned to the hospital 3 hours after leaving, he found Margaret and Lily engaged in what appeared to be a very serious discussion about which Hogwarts house they'd each be sorted into. "Daddy," Lily called when she saw him. "Margaret says she'd be Ravenclaw, but I think she's wrong. I think she's Gryffindor." "Is that so?" Ethan set his duffel down, feeling lighter than he had in days. Clean clothes, clean body, and his daughter arguing about fictional wizards. These were problems he could handle. "It's the decisiveness," Lily explained, "and the bravery. She came and helped us when we were strangers. That's a Gryffindor thing." Margaret looked genuinely touched. "That might be the nicest thing anyone's ever said to me." "What house would Daddy be?" Lily asked. "Hufflepuff," Margaret said immediately. "Loyal, hardworking, dedicated to those he loves." Ethan felt his face heat. "I don't know enough about this to have an opinion." "We'll educate you," Lily declared. "Margaret and I decided we're going to read all the books together. Right, Margaret? If your father doesn't mind me monopolizing your recovery time." Ethan looked at this woman who'd appeared in his life like some kind of miracle and stayed like she belonged there. "I don't mind at all," he said quietly. The days began to blend together in the way hospital time does, marked by doctor visits and medication schedules rather than normal rhythms of morning and night. Lily's progress was steady. She graduated from bed rest to sitting up, from sitting to standing with assistance, from standing to taking careful steps with a walker. Each milestone was celebrated like a victory because it was. Ethan went back to work part-time, covering just enough shifts to keep his job and his insurance. His supervisor was understanding. Everyone had heard about Lily's accident, and construction sites ran on a code of brotherhood that made allowances for family emergencies. His coworkers had even taken up a collection, presenting him with an envelope of cash that made his throat tight with gratitude. But it was Margaret who filled the gaps. Margaret, who was there during the day when Ethan had to work. Margaret, who hired a tutor so Lily wouldn't fall behind in school. Margaret, who arranged for Lily's friends to visit, carefully scheduling around medical procedures and rest times. Margaret, who seemed to know exactly what was needed before anyone asked. "Don't you have your own life to get back to?" Ethan asked her one evening. Lily was asleep, and they were sitting in the chairs by the window, watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled. Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "I did," she said finally. Past tense. "I had Richard's life, really. Faculty dinners and department politics and literary symposiums. I had my charity boards. Organizations I sat on because it was expected, not because I cared deeply. I had lunches with other widows who measured their worth by their dead husband's accomplishments. She turned to look at him. I don't miss any of it, if I'm being honest. This, she gestured vaguely at the hospital room, at sleeping Lily, at everything and nothing. This feels more real than anything I've done in years. Margaret, I know what you're going to say, that this can't last forever, that eventually Lily will go home and you'll return to your life and I'll return to mine, that I'm getting attached to something temporary. She smiled, but it was sad. I'm not naive, Ethan. I know how this works. I'm just enjoying it while it's happening. He wanted to tell her she was wrong, that this didn't have to be temporary, that maybe they could figure out a way to keep this unlikely family they'd built. But he didn't know how to promise that. Didn't know what right he had to offer something he couldn't define. Instead, he said, "You've become important to her, to both of us." "Good," Margaret said simply. "Because you've become important to me, too." On day 12, Dr. Morrison said the word they'd been waiting for: discharge. Lily was healed enough to continue her recovery at home, with outpatient physical therapy 3 times a week and a follow-up schedule that would gradually decrease over the next 6 months. She's exceeded every expectation, the doctor said, and his professional pride was obvious. This could have been so much worse. She's a very lucky little girl. Lucky. The word caught Ethan wrong. Lily wasn't lucky. She'd been hit by a car, nearly paralyzed, spent almost 2 weeks in the hospital. But he understood what the doctor meant. Given the severity of the accident, given how close they'd come to losing her, given all the things that could have gone wrong but didn't, yes, they were lucky. They were also broke. Even with insurance, even with Margaret's intervention, there would be bills, physical therapy, medications, follow-up appointments, the modifications he'd need to make to their apartment for accessibility while Lily was still using the walker. He'd been avoiding thinking about the money, but now, with discharge imminent, he couldn't avoid it anymore. Margaret found him in the hallway that evening, staring at the itemized statement the billing department had given him. The numbers made his head swim. "Don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Don't catastrophize about the finances. We'll figure it out." "But, Margaret, I can't keep letting you. We'll figure it out," she repeated more firmly. "Later. Right now, focus on getting Lily home." But Ethan couldn't let it go. "You've already done too much, paid too much. I need to start, I don't know, making payment arrangements, talking to financial assistants, something." "Why does this bother you so much?" Margaret's voice was gentle but curious. "I have resources I'm not using. You have need. It's simple mathematics." "It's not simple," Ethan said, his frustration bubbling up. "It's charity. It's pity. It's love," Margaret interrupted quietly, "or at least the beginning of it. And love doesn't keep ledgers, Ethan." The word hung between them, love. Had she really just said that? In the fluorescent hallway of a hospital, standing beside a sad attempt at artwork and a hand sanitizer dispenser, Margaret Hale had just said love. "Margaret, I'm not asking you to say it back," she said quickly. "I'm not asking for anything. I'm just telling you the truth. These past 2 weeks, with you and Lily, I've felt more alive than I have in years. More useful, more needed, more like myself than I've been since Richard died. Maybe even before then." She looked down at the billing statement in his hands. "So no, it's not charity, it's not pity. It's me being selfish, actually, because taking care of you both makes me happy. And I've been unhappy for so long, I'd almost forgotten what this felt like." Ethan stared at her, this elegant woman with her careful makeup and expensive clothes, and a loneliness so deep it matched his own. "I don't know what to say to that." "Then don't say anything. Just let me help. Let me be part of this." He wanted to. God, he wanted to so badly. But pride was a stubborn thing, and Ethan had been independent for so long, had carried everything alone for so long, that accepting help felt like admitting weakness, like proving he wasn't enough. Margaret must have seen something of that struggle in his face, because she reached out and took the billing statement from his hands, folding it neatly. "Pride is expensive, Ethan," she said quietly, "and loneliness is even more so. Don't let either one cost you something precious." Before he could respond, Lily's voice called from her room. "Daddy? Margaret? Where did everybody go? The moment broke. They both smiled, that shared recognition of a child's impeccable timing, and went back into the room where Lily was sitting up in bed, looking indignant at having been left alone. "We're right here, sweetheart," Ethan said. "Good, because I have important news." Lily gestured for them to come closer, her expression serious. "The nurse said I get to go home soon, and I've been thinking about something." "What's that, love?" Margaret asked, settling into her usual chair. "When I go home, I want Margaret to come too. Not to stay forever," she clarified quickly, as if understanding the impossibility of that. "But to visit. A lot. Because she's our friend now, and friends visit each other." Ethan and Margaret exchanged a look over Lily's head, complicated, full of unspoken questions and uncertain answers. "I'd like that very much," Margaret said, "if your father doesn't mind." "Daddy?" Lily turned her hopeful face to him. "Can Margaret be our friend who visits a lot?" What could he say to that? How could he deny his daughter this connection that had clearly become important to her? How could he deny himself the same thing, even if it scared him, even if he didn't know how to navigate whatever this was becoming? "Yeah, Lilybug," he said softly, "Margaret can definitely be our friend who visits a lot." The smile that broke across Lily's face was worth every complication, every uncertainty. She clapped her hands together, carefully, mindful of her healing arm, and bounced as much as someone with spinal injuries could bounce. "This is going to be so great. Margaret can help me with my homework, and we can finish reading Harry Potter. And maybe she can teach me about art because she knows about art. Right, Margaret? You went to museums with your husband?" "I did," Margaret confirmed, her own smile matching Lily's. "And I'd be honored to share that with you." Ethan watched them plan, these two people who'd become his whole world so quickly it made him dizzy. And he thought about what Margaret had said in the hallway, about love, about being selfish, about happiness. Maybe she was right. Maybe this didn't have to be complicated. Maybe he could just let it happen, let her in, let himself believe that good things could come from terrible circumstances, that families could be built from fragments and fear, and two lonely people finding each other in a hospital waiting room. Maybe that was allowed. 3 days later, they brought Lily home. Margaret insisted on driving them. Her car was newer, smoother, safer, and Ethan's truck was still in the shop anyway. She pulled up to the hospital entrance in a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Ethan made in a year, and he tried not to feel self-conscious about bringing her to his modest apartment building. But if Margaret noticed the peeling paint, or the questionable elevator, or the hallway that smelled faintly of old cooking and mildew, she didn't show it. She helped carry Lily's things upstairs, commented genuinely on the light in the windows, admired the photographs on the refrigerator. "This is a good home," she said simply, and Ethan believed she meant it. They got Lily settled on the couch, her walker within reach, her medications organized, her comfort items arranged around her. She looked small in the space, fragile in a way that made Ethan's chest ache. But she also looked happy. To be out of the hospital, to be in her own space, to have both Ethan and Margaret fussing over her like she was the most important person in the world. Which, to both of them, she was. Margaret stayed for dinner, take-out Chinese food because Ethan hadn't grocery shopped in 2 weeks, and his refrigerator contained approximately 1 condiment and a questionable container of yogurt. They ate sitting around the coffee table, Lily holding court from her throne of couch cushions, telling them about all the things she wanted to do now that she was home. "Can we go to the park when I can walk better? And can Margaret come to my next dance recital? And oh, can we get ice cream this weekend? I've been craving strawberry ice cream for like 1,000,000 years." "We can do all of those things," Ethan promised, "when Dr. Morrison says you're ready." When Margaret finally stood to leave, as the sky outside darkened toward night, Lily's face fell. "You're coming back though, right? You promised you'd visit a lot." "I promised," Margaret confirmed. "How about I come by tomorrow? We can continue reading our book." "And the day after that?" Margaret glanced at Ethan, uncertain. He nodded. What else could he do? "And the day after that," Margaret agreed. At the door, as Ethan walked her out, Margaret paused. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for letting me be part of this, part of her homecoming." "Thank you for wanting to be," Ethan replied. They stood there in the doorway, the hallway light flickering overhead, And Ethan realized how badly he didn't want her to leave, how much he'd gotten used to her presence, her calm, her steady certainty that everything would be okay. "Margaret," he began, not knowing what he wanted to say. She waited, patient. "I'm glad you sat down next to me that night," he said finally. "In the waiting room. I'm glad you didn't just walk away." Her smile was soft, genuine. "So am I, Ethan. So am I." And then she left, her footsteps echoing down the hallway, and Ethan closed the door feeling like something important had just begun, something fragile and precious and terrifying, something that felt against all odds like hope. Margaret did come back the next day, and the day after that, and the day after that, until her presence in their lives became as natural as breathing. She arrived each morning around 10, after Ethan had left for work, carrying coffee and pastries from that cafe 3 blocks from the hospital. She stayed through Lily's physical therapy appointments, holding her hand through the painful stretches, celebrating each small victory. She helped with homework, read chapters of books in different voices, taught Lily about impressionist painters and classical music and all the things that filled the quiet spaces of recovery. Within 2 weeks, she had her own key to the apartment. Ethan had given it to her almost without thinking, pressing the spare into her palm one evening when she was leaving. "So you don't have to wait in the hallway if we're running late," he'd said, but they both knew it meant more than that. Keys were trust. Keys were permanence. Keys were an acknowledgement that she belonged here now, in this small life they were building together. The routine they'd fallen into felt comfortable, right? Ethan would leave for the construction site at dawn, kissing Lily's forehead as she slept, finding notes from Margaret on the kitchen counter, reminders about medications, updates on Lily's progress. Sometimes just small encouragements. "You're doing great." "We both are." He'd work his shift, his body aching in familiar ways, his mind always half present, wondering how Lily was doing. Then he'd come home to find dinner waiting, usually something Margaret had prepared or ordered, the 3 of them eating together like they were playing house, except it didn't feel like playing anymore. It felt real, too real, maybe. Because Ethan found himself watching Margaret in unguarded moments, noticing the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was concentrating, the way she laughed at Lily's jokes with her whole face, the way she'd started keeping a cardigan at their apartment because she got cold in the evenings. He noticed the photographs she'd begun leaving on her phone, candid shots of Lily painting, of their dinner table, of the 3 of them together. He noticed how she'd stopped mentioning her own house, her own life outside these walls. And he noticed how much he'd come to depend on her, not just for the practical help, though that was considerable, but for the companionship, the partnership, the feeling that he wasn't carrying everything alone anymore. For the first time since Rebecca left, Ethan felt like he had someone in his corner, someone who saw him not just as Lily's father, but as Ethan, a person with his own needs and fears and worth. It terrified him. 6 weeks after the accident, on a Thursday evening in late autumn, everything changed. Lily had gone to bed early, worn out from a particularly challenging physical therapy session. Ethan and Margaret sat in the living room, the television playing something neither of them was watching. Margaret had her laptop open, answering emails for one of her charity boards, and Ethan was sorting through the mail he'd been ignoring for days. He almost missed it. The envelope was thin, official-looking, buried between credit card offers and grocery store flyers, but something made him look twice at the return address. Whitmore and Associates, attorneys at law. His hands went cold. "Ethan?" Margaret looked up, catching something in his expression. "What is it?" He opened the envelope, pulling out the letter with fingers that had started to shake. The words swam in front of his eyes, refusing to make sense at first. Then they came into terrible focus. "Dear Mr. Cole, we represent Rebecca Martinez Cole regarding matters of custody and visitation concerning the minor child, Lily Grace Cole." The letter fell from his hands. Margaret was beside him instantly, picking it up, reading it with her lawyer's daughter eyes that knew how to parse legal language. Her face went very still. "She's filing for custody," Margaret said, her voice carefully neutral. "She's claiming you've been negligent, that you allowed Lily to be in an unsafe situation that resulted in her injuries, that you've been receiving inappropriate financial assistance from an unrelated third party." She stopped, looking at Ethan. That's me? She's talking about me. Ethan couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. Rebecca. After 3 years of silence, of absence, of not even bothering to update her contact information, she was suddenly back. And she wanted Lily. How did she even find out? His voice sounded distant, not quite his own. About the accident, about Margaret, about any of it. Social media, maybe, Margaret said grimly. Hospital records, any number of ways. She was still reading the letter, her expression growing darker. She's claiming that your relationship with me is inappropriate, that you've exploited your daughter's medical emergency for financial gain, that you're unable to provide adequate care. Ethan, this is character assassination. Can she do this? He looked at Margaret, desperate for her to tell him no. This was a mistake. Rebecca had no standing. Can she just show up after 3 years and take her? I don't know, Margaret admitted, but we need to get you a lawyer, a good one, immediately. The next 2 weeks were a nightmare of depositions and paperwork and legal consultations. Margaret hired him the best family law attorney in the state, a woman named Patricia Chen who had a reputation for being brilliant and ruthless in equal measure. Patricia listened to Ethan's story with sharp attention, taking notes, asking questions that made him uncomfortable. The problem, Patricia said at their second meeting, is that Rebecca technically never lost custody. She left, but there was no formal custody arrangement, no court order giving you sole rights. Legally, you're still sharing custody even if she hasn't exercised it. That's insane, Ethan said. She abandoned us. I understand, and will absolutely argue abandonment, but we need to be prepared for her side. She'll claim she was struggling with postpartum depression or mental health issues. She'll say she needed time to get help, to stabilize. She'll paint herself as a mother who made the difficult choice to get better before she could be there for her daughter. And the accident, she's blaming me for that. She's claiming negligence, that you should have been the one picking Lily up from the party, not allowing another parent to drive her. Patricia's expression was sympathetic but honest. It's a weak argument, but it'll resonate emotionally. A child is injured under your care. A mother comes back to protect her. This is unbelievable. It gets worse. Patricia pulled out another document. She's also filed a complaint suggesting that your relationship with Mrs. Hale is inappropriate and potentially predatory. Margaret, who'd been sitting quietly in the corner of the office, spoke for the first time. Predatory? She's implying that you targeted Ethan in a vulnerable moment, that you've used your financial resources to insinuate yourself into his life and his daughter's care, that this relationship is transactional rather than genuine. Patricia looked uncomfortable. She's painting you as a wealthy older woman who's essentially buying a family. The words landed like physical blows. Ethan saw Margaret flinch, saw color rise in her cheeks. We're not. Margaret stopped, struggling for words. I care about them. Genuinely. This isn't about money or control or whatever she's suggesting. I know, Patricia said gently, but perception matters in family court, and the optics here are complicated. A wealthy widow suddenly involved in every aspect of a single father's life, paying medical bills, providing financial support, essentially co-parenting a child she has no legal relationship to. She paused. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it's how Rebecca's attorney will spin it. Ethan felt sick. Everything that had felt like grace, like connection, like maybe something beautiful coming from tragedy. Rebecca was twisting it into something ugly, something suspicious. What do we do? He asked. Patricia considered. We fight. We document everything. Every moment of Rebecca's absence, every attempt to contact her, every way you've been a devoted father. We get statements from Lily's teachers, her doctors, her friends' parents. We show the court who you are as a parent. Wait. She hesitated. And we'll need to address the relationship with Mrs. Hale, either by establishing clear boundaries or by demonstrating that it's appropriate and beneficial to Lily. After they left Patricia's office, Ethan and Margaret sat in her car in the parking garage, neither speaking. The silence was heavy, suffocating. Finally, Margaret said, Maybe I should step back. What? From you and Lily. Give you some distance. Let you fight this without me being a complication. Her voice was steady, but her hands were white-knuckled on the steering wheel. I don't want to be the reason you lose her, Ethan. You're not, Margaret. You saved her. You've been helping us. I know, but if my presence is hurting your case, no. The word came out more forcefully than he'd intended. No, I'm not doing that. I'm not pushing you away because Rebecca suddenly decided to be a mother again. You've been there. You've shown up. You matter to Lily, to me. Margaret turned to look at him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. This is going to get ugly, Ethan. She's going to say terrible things about both of us, about what this is, what we mean to each other. Then let her, Ethan said, surprised by his own certainty. Let her say whatever she wants. We know the truth. But as the days passed and the legal battle intensified, Ethan found his certainty wavering. Rebecca's attorney was aggressive, filing motion after motion, demanding supervised visitation, questioning Ethan's judgment, requesting financial disclosures that would show exactly how much Margaret had paid for Lily's care. And then the bills started arriving. They came in a manila envelope, delivered by courier to Ethan's apartment. No note, no explanation, just copies of every invoice from Lily's hospital stay, every payment Margaret had made on his behalf. The total was staggering, over $200,000. Ethan stared at the number until it stopped making sense. $200,000. Margaret had paid $200,000, and she'd never mentioned it, had never asked for repayment, had never even hinted at the magnitude of what she'd done. He confronted her that evening, the invoices spread across his coffee table like evidence at a crime scene. Why didn't you tell me? His voice was tight, controlled. Why didn't you tell me it was this much? Margaret looked at the papers without touching them. Because it doesn't matter. Doesn't matter? Margaret, I can never pay you back. Never. Even if I worked every day for the rest of my life. I don't want you to pay me back, she interrupted. I never wanted that. Then what do you want? The question came out louder than he'd intended. Lily was in her room, hopefully asleep, but he lowered his voice. Because Rebecca's attorney is saying you want ownership, control, that you're using money to manipulate us. That's not true. Isn't it? He hated himself for saying it, hated the doubt Rebecca had planted in his mind, but he couldn't stop. You show up, you fix everything, you make yourself indispensable. You have a key to my apartment. You're here every day. You make decisions about Lily's care without asking me first. I've never made a decision without consulting you, Margaret said, her voice rising to match his. Every single thing I've done, I've asked, I've checked, I've made sure you were comfortable. Did you ask before paying $200,000? The question hung between them, sharp and accusing. Margaret's face went pale. No, she admitted. I didn't ask that. Because if I had, you would have said no. You would have let pride get in the way of Lily getting the care she needed. That wasn't your choice to make. Someone had to make it. Margaret stood, her composure finally cracking. Someone had to do something while you sat there paralyzed by bureaucracy and absent mothers and your own stubborn independence. I'm sorry if that offends you, Ethan. I'm sorry if my help feels like control. But I'd do it again, every dollar, every decision, because Lily is alive and healing, and that matters more than your pride. This isn't about pride. Yes, it is, Margaret's voice broke. It's exactly about pride. You're so terrified of needing anyone, so determined to prove you can handle everything alone, that you can't see when someone is trying to love you. The word stopped him cold. Love. There it was again, no longer tentative, no longer qualified. Love, spoken in anger and frustration and desperate honesty. Margaret, no, let me finish. She was crying now, tears streaming down her face, all her careful composure shattered. I know what this looks like. I know how it seems. A lonely widow latching onto someone else's family because she couldn't have her own. Plain fairy godmother with money she doesn't know what to do with. But that's not what this is. That's not what you are to me. She pressed a hand to her chest. You and Lily, you've given me purpose again. You've made me feel needed and useful and connected to something real. And yes, I have money. And yes, I've used it to help you, but that's not why I'm here. I'm here because when I'm with you both, I'm happy. For the first time in years, I'm actually happy. Ethan felt something break inside him, not clean, but messy, painful, like old wounds tearing open. I can't give you what you want, he said quietly. I'm a construction worker with a kid in debt and an ex-wife trying to take custody. I can't be your second chance at the life you didn't get to have." Margaret recoiled as if he'd slapped her. "Is that what you think this is? Some pathetic attempt to replace what I lost? Isn't it?" "No." She grabbed her purse, her coat, her hands shaking. "No, Ethan, it's not. But clearly you've already decided what my motives are, so there's no point in me defending myself." "Margaret, wait." But she was already at the door. She paused with her hand on the knob, her back to him. "For what it's worth," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I never wanted to control you. I wanted to partner with you. There's a difference." Then she was gone, and Ethan was alone with $200,000 worth of invoices and the echo of words he couldn't take back. He didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the fight, hearing Margaret's voice break on the word love, seeing the hurt in her eyes when he'd accused her of trying to replace the family she'd lost. Was he right? Was she using them? Or was he so damaged by Rebecca's abandonment that he couldn't recognize genuine care when it was offered? The questions circled endlessly, offering no answers. In the morning, Lily asked where Margaret was. "She's not coming today, sweetheart," Ethan said, making breakfast with mechanical efficiency. "Why not?" "She's busy." Lily studied him with those two perceptive 8-year-old eyes. "Did you fight? What makes you think that? You look sad, and Margaret always comes, so if she's not coming, something must be wrong." Lily pushed her cereal around her bowl. "I heard you yelling last night." Guilt crashed over him. "I'm sorry, Lilybug. I didn't mean for you to hear that." "Are you and Margaret breaking up?" The question was so innocent, so matter-of-fact, that it took Ethan a moment to process. Breaking up implied they'd been together, which they hadn't, not officially, not in any way he'd acknowledged out loud. But to Lily, who'd watched them build this life together, who'd seen Margaret become a fixture as constant as furniture, it must have seemed like they were a unit, a family. "It's complicated," he said finally. "Adults always say that when they don't want to tell the truth," Lily said, with devastating accuracy. "I like Margaret. She's nice to us. She makes you smile." "I know." "Then why did you fight?" How could he explain this to an 8-year-old? How could he articulate his fear that Margaret's help came with strings, his terror of being controlled, his bone-deep certainty that he didn't deserve someone like her in his life? How could he admit that Rebecca's accusations had wormed into his brain and made him question everything? "Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things," he said lamely. "That's still not the truth." Lily set down her spoon. "Mom's coming back, isn't she? That's what this is about." Ethan's breath caught. They hadn't told Lily about the custody case yet, hadn't wanted to worry her while she was still recovering, but somehow she knew anyway. "How did you—" "I heard you on the phone with that lawyer lady, and I saw the papers on the table." Lily's voice was small, scared. "Is Mom going to take me away?" Ethan moved around the table and pulled his daughter into his arms, careful of her still healing injuries. "No one is taking you anywhere, Lily, I promise." "But Mom wants to?" "Your mom—" He stopped, choosing words carefully. "Your mom has some things she needs to work out, but you're staying with me. Right here. Okay?" Lily nodded against his chest, but he could feel her trembling. "I don't want to leave you, Daddy, and I don't want Margaret to leave either. I like our family the way it is now." Our family. There it was again, that word that meant everything and nothing, that he'd been avoiding defining because definition meant commitment, and commitment meant vulnerability. "I like it too, sweetheart," he admitted. "I like it too." 3 days passed without Margaret. 3 days of Ethan taking time off work to be with Lily, of dinners that felt wrong without a third person, of his phone staying silent when he kept expecting it to ring. He drafted a dozen texts to her and deleted them all. What could he say? "I'm sorry" felt inadequate. "I was wrong" felt presumptuous. Maybe he hadn't been wrong. Maybe his suspicions were justified. But every time he looked at Lily, at the disappointment in her eyes when Margaret didn't show up, he felt his certainty crumbling. On the 4th day, Patricia called with an update on the case. "Rebecca's attorney has requested an emergency hearing," she said without preamble. "They're claiming that Lily is in an unstable environment and asking for immediate temporary custody pending the full hearing." Can they do that? They can request it. Whether the judge will grant it is another matter. Patricia's voice was grim. But Ethan, I need to ask you something. Where is Margaret Hale? I've been trying to reach her for 2 days and she's not returning my calls. We had a disagreement. She's been staying away. A long pause. Ethan, I need her testimony. She's our best witness to your parenting, to the circumstances of Lily's care, to countering Rebecca's claims about inappropriate relationships. If she won't participate, I'll talk to her, Ethan said. Do more than talk. We need her in court. The hearing is in 5 days. After he hung up, Ethan sat with his phone in his hand for a long time. Finally, he opened his messages and typed, Margaret, I need to talk to you, please. The response came 20 minutes later. I'm at my house, you know the address. He did know it. She'd mentioned it in passing once, though he'd never been there. It was in the wealthy part of the city, the neighborhood where old money lived behind gates and manicured lawns. He got a friend to watch Lily and drove there in the late afternoon, his truck feeling conspicuously shabby on these pristine streets. Margaret's house was exactly what he'd expected, and nothing like it. It was large, yes, but not ostentatious. Colonial architecture, tasteful landscaping, the kind of quiet elegance that spoke of security rather than showing off. He parked in the circular driveway and walked to the front door on legs that felt unsteady. Margaret answered on the second knock. She looked tired, shadows under her eyes, her hair pulled back carelessly, wearing jeans and a sweater instead of her usual polished outfits. She looked, he realized, like she'd been crying. Come in, she said, stepping back. The interior was beautiful. Hardwood floors, crown molding, furniture that was clearly antique but not fussy. But it was also empty in a way that had nothing to do with space. No photographs on the walls, no personal items scattered around. Just carefully curated beauty that felt more like a museum than a home. You wanted to talk, Margaret said, leading him to a sitting room with windows overlooking the garden. Ethan sat, then stood, too agitated to settle. Patricia says she needs you to testify. At the emergency hearing, she says your testimony is crucial. I see. Margaret, I'll do it, she interrupted. Of course I'll do it. Whatever Lily needs. That's it? Just like that? She looked at him steadily. Did you think I wouldn't? That I'd abandon you because we had a fight? The word abandon hit him like a physical blow. No, I don't know. Maybe. I'm not Rebecca, Ethan. I know. Do you? Margaret moved to the window, her arms wrapped around herself. Because the other night, you looked at me like I was someone trying to control you, manipulate you, take something from you. I was scared, he admitted. Rebecca's accusations, the money, all of it, it got in my head, made me question things I shouldn't have questioned. Like what? Like why you're here, what you want from us. Margaret turned to face him. And what did you decide? What terrible motive did you assign me? That's not fair, isn't it? Her voice was sharp. You accused me of trying to buy a family, of using my money to manipulate you, of, what was it you said? Using you as a second chance at the life I didn't get to have. She laughed, but it was bitter. As if people are interchangeable, as if you and Lily could just slot into some vacancy left by Richard and Sarah. I shouldn't have said that. No, you shouldn't have, but you did. And now I need to know, is that really what you think of me? Ethan crossed the space between them, close enough to see the hurt in her eyes, the vulnerability she usually hid so well. No, he said firmly. No, that's not what I think. It's what I told myself because I was terrified. Of what? Of needing you. The admission came out raw, honest. Of my daughter needing you, of building something with you that could fall apart and leave us even more broken than we already were. Margaret's expression softened slightly. So you pushed me away first, before I could leave. I guess I did. That's not fair to either of us, Ethan, and it's certainly not fair to Lily. I know. He reached for her hand hesitantly, relieved when she didn't pull away. I'm sorry for what I said, for how I said it, for doubting you when you've done nothing but show up for us. I'm sorry too, Margaret said quietly. for not being transparent about the money. You were right. I should have told you. I should have asked. I was so afraid you'd refuse, and I couldn't let that happen. I couldn't let Lily suffer because of principle or pride or whatever you want to call it. I understand why you did it, and I'm grateful. I'm so grateful, Margaret. I just wish— What? I wish I knew how to accept help without feeling like I'm failing somehow. Margaret squeezed his hand. You're not failing. You're one of the best fathers I've ever seen. You've kept Lily safe and loved and cared for despite everything working against you. Asking for help doesn't diminish that. It doesn't make you weak. Then why does it feel like it does? Because somewhere along the way, someone taught you that needing people was weakness. Probably when your wife walked away and you had to figure out how to survive alone. She pulled him toward the couch, and they sat together, still holding hands. But that person was wrong. Needing people, letting them help, building community, that's not weakness. That's how humans are supposed to live. They sat in silence for a while, the afternoon light slanting through the windows, illuminating dust motes in the air. This house felt different with Margaret in it, Ethan realized. Less like a museum and more like a place where someone actually lived. Your testimony, he said eventually. At the hearing, Rebecca's attorney is going to come after you. They're going to make this ugly. I know. They're going to suggest our relationship is inappropriate, that you're trying to replace Rebecca, that you've manipulated me, manipulated Lily. I know, Margaret repeated, but it doesn't matter what they suggest. What matters is the truth. And the truth is that I care about you both deeply, that every decision I've made has been in Lily's best interest, and that this, whatever this is between us, it's real. It's not transactional, it's not manipulation, it's not some widow's desperate attempt to fill a void. What is it then? Ethan asked, searching her face. Margaret met his eyes directly. It's love, Ethan. I told you that already. It's messy and complicated and probably ill-timed given everything happening with Rebecca, but it's love. And I'm not going to apologize for it. His heart hammered against his ribs. Margaret, you don't have to say it back, she said quickly. I'm not asking for that. I'm just telling you where I stand and where I'll continue to stand, whether you want me there or not, because I'm not doing this for you. I'm doing it for Lily and for myself, because loving you both has made me happier than I've been in years. And I'm not giving that up without a fight. Ethan pulled her close, wrapping his arms around her, breathing in the scent of her perfume and the underlying smell that was just Margaret. I do love you, he said against her hair. I'm terrified of it. I don't know what to do with it, but I do. And the thought of losing you, of pushing you away because I'm too scared to be vulnerable, that terrifies me more than anything Rebecca could throw at us. Margaret pulled back enough to look at him, her eyes wet. Then we face it together. All of it. Rebecca, the hearing, whatever comes next. Together. Together, he agreed. They kissed then, finally, after weeks of carefully maintained distance and unacknowledged tension. It was soft and tentative and felt like coming home. When they pulled apart, both were crying. Margaret openly, Ethan trying not to. And it felt right somehow. Honest. We should get back to Lily, Ethan said eventually. She's been worried about you. I've been worried about her too. Margaret stood, wiping her eyes. And Ethan, about the money, the bills. We'll figure something out, payment plans, whatever you need, to feel like this is fair. I don't want that between us. Okay, he said, because he could hear how important this was to her. We'll figure it out. They drove back to Ethan's apartment in Margaret's car, hands linked across the console, and when they walked in together, Lily's face lit up like sunrise. Margaret. She tried to get up too quickly, winced, but Margaret was already there, carefully hugging her. I'm sorry I've been away, Margaret said. Your dad and I needed to work some things out. And did you? Lily asked hopefully. We did. Good. Lily looked between them with satisfaction. Because I was going to be really mad if you two broke up our family. Our family. There was that phrase again. And this time, instead of flinching from it, Ethan embraced it, because maybe that's what they were becoming. Not in the traditional sense, not in any way that would satisfy a court or a legal definition, but in the way that mattered, in choice, in commitment, in showing up day after day, a chosen family. 5 days later, they stood in a courthouse hearing room facing Rebecca for the first time in 3 years. She looked different, thinner, older, her hair shorter. She wore a conservative dress and kept her eyes down, the picture of maternal contrition. Her lawyer, a sharp-suited man named Brennan, immediately went on the offensive. "Your Honor, we're here because my client's daughter was nearly killed in a traffic accident while under her father's supervision. Since then, Mr. Cole has allowed an unrelated third party, a wealthy older woman with no familial connection, to essentially take over parenting duties, make medical decisions, and insinuate herself into every aspect of this child's life." Patricia stood smoothly. "Objection, Your Honor. Mr. Brennan is mischaracterizing the situation." "I'll hear the argument," the judge said, a middle-aged woman with sharp eyes. "Continue, Mr. Brennan, but stick to facts." And so it began. The hearing that would determine whether Ethan kept his daughter or lost her to a woman who'd disappeared 3 years ago. Margaret sat in the gallery, her hands folded in her lap, her face composed. But Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself perfectly still. This was it, the moment everything could fall apart, and all they could do was tell the truth and hope it was enough. Brennan called Rebecca to the stand first, and she walked to the witness box with her head bowed, the very picture of a penitent mother returning from the wilderness. Ethan watched her, this woman he'd once loved enough to marry, to build a life with, and felt nothing but a distant anger wrapped in exhaustion. "Ms. Cole," Brennan began. She'd apparently reclaimed her married name. "Can you tell the court why you left your family 3 years ago?" Rebecca's voice was soft, tremulous. "I was suffering from severe postpartum depression. It had been years since Lily was born, but I'd never properly addressed it, never gotten help. I was drowning, and I didn't know how to ask for what I needed." She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I knew if I stayed, I might hurt myself. Or worse. So I left to get treatment." "And did you? Get treatment?" "Yes. I checked into a facility in Nevada, spent 6 months there working with therapists, getting on the right medications. Then I did outpatient work for another year. I've been stable now for over a year." "Why didn't you contact your daughter during this time?" "The doctors advised against it. They said I needed to focus entirely on my recovery, that trying to maintain contact while I was unstable would be harmful to both of us." Rebecca's voice broke convincingly. "It was the hardest decision I've ever made, but I thought I was doing what was best for Lily." Ethan wanted to stand up and scream. This wasn't what happened. There had been no postpartum depression. Or if there had been, she'd never mentioned it, never sought help while they were together. She'd left because she'd wanted out, because being a mother and wife had felt like a trap. He knew because she'd told him exactly that in one of their last fights before she disappeared. But he couldn't speak. Not yet. He had to sit and listen while Rebecca rewrote their history into something more palatable. "When did you learn about your daughter's accident?" Brennan asked. "About 2 months ago. A friend saw something on social media and reached out to me. When I found out Lily had been in the hospital, that she'd nearly died and I hadn't been there," Rebecca broke down into sobs. "I realized I couldn't stay away anymore. My daughter needed me. Needs me." "And what did you discover when you began investigating the current situation?" "I discovered that a stranger has essentially replaced me. That this woman, Margaret Hale, has been making medical decisions for my daughter, paying her bills, acting as her mother. And that Ethan has allowed this, has encouraged it, because he's—" She stopped, as if struggling with the words. "I think he's using Lily to maintain this woman's interest. This wealthy woman who can give them things I never could." "Objection!" Patricia was on her feet. "Speculation and character assassination, Your Honor." "Sustained," the judge said. "Ms. Cole, stick to what you observed, not your interpretations." Rebecca nodded, chastened. "I just want my daughter back. I want to be her mother again. I'm healthy now. I'm stable. I have a job, an apartment. I can provide for her." Patricia's cross-examination was surgical. "Ms. Cole, you said you left to get treatment for postpartum depression. Do you have medical records documenting this treatment?" Rebecca hesitated. "Some of it was in a facility that's since closed. The records are hard to access." "But you have some records." "A few. Can you provide them to the court?" My attorney is working on obtaining them. Patricia's expression was skeptical. In the 3 years you were gone, how many times did you attempt to contact your daughter? I told you, the doctor said. How many times, Ms. Cole? None. But it was medical advice, and so for 3 years your daughter heard nothing from you. No birthday cards, no Christmas presents, no phone calls to let her know you were alive and thinking of her. It was to protect her. Did you pay child support during those 3 years? Rebecca's face flushed. I wasn't in a position to… That's a no. Did you update your contact information with Mr. Cole so you could be reached in case of emergency? I needed a clean break to heal. Also a no. In fact, when your daughter was lying in a hospital bed requiring emergency surgery, Mr. Cole couldn't reach you because you'd made yourself completely unreachable. Isn't that correct? I didn't know she was hurt. Because you'd chosen to disappear so completely that no one could find you, even in a medical emergency involving your child. Patricia let that hang in the air. Ms. Cole, you mentioned seeing something on social media about Lily's accident. Whose social media? A mutual friend's page. Which friend? I don't remember exactly. You don't remember the person whose post made you suddenly decide to be a mother again after 3 years? Brennan objected and the judge sustained it, but the damage was done. Rebecca's story had holes large enough to drive through. When it was Ethan's turn on the stand, Brennan went straight for the jugular. Mr. Cole, let's talk about the accident. Where were you when your daughter was injured? I was driving behind the car she was in. Another vehicle ran a red light and struck them. But you weren't the one driving Lily. No, another parent from the birthday party was giving her a ride home. Why weren't you driving your own daughter? I had to work. The other mother offered, and I accepted. So you chose work over your daughter's safety. Patricia objected, and the judge sustained it, but again, the implication lingered. Tell me about Margaret Hale, Brennan continued. When did you meet her? The night of the accident, in the hospital waiting room. So a complete stranger. At the time, yes. And within hours of meeting this stranger, you allowed her to make financial decisions regarding your daughter's medical care? The hospital needed consent from both parents. I couldn't reach Rebecca. Margaret helped navigate the legal issues so Lily could get the surgery she needed. Did you ask Ms. Hale to pay for this surgery? No, she offered. And you accepted. $200,000 from a woman you'd known for less than a day. Ethan's jaw tightened. My daughter was dying. Margaret offered help that saved her life. Yes, I accepted. Has Ms. Hale given you other financial assistance since then? She's helped with some expenses related to Lily's recovery. How much total? Ethan glanced at Patricia, who nodded slightly. Including the surgery and related medical costs, approximately $250,000. A murmur ran through the courtroom. Brennan looked satisfied. That's quite a debt to owe someone. Would you say you feel obligated to Ms. Hale? I feel grateful to her. Grateful enough to allow her unrestricted access to your home and your daughter? Margaret has been helping with Lily's care during her recovery. She's been invaluable. She has a key to your apartment, doesn't she? Yes. She makes medical decisions for Lily? She consults with me first. Does she or doesn't she participate in medical decisions for your daughter? She does, but she provides meals, helps with homework, attends physical therapy appointments. Yes. She essentially functions as Lily's mother, would you say? Patricia objected, but Ethan answered anyway. She functions as someone who cares about Lily's well-being, as a friend, as someone we trust. Or as someone you can't afford to lose because you owe her $250,000. That's not… No further questions. Patricia's redirect tried to repair the damage, walking Ethan through his 3 years of solo parenting, his employment history, his dedication to Lily. But Ethan could feel the hearing slipping away from them. Brennan had painted a picture of a father so financially desperate he'd allowed a wealthy stranger to buy her way into his family. Then Margaret took the stand. She walked to the witness box with her head high, every inch the composed, elegant woman Ethan had first met in that hospital waiting room. She stated her name, her age, her background, widow, no children, extensive work with various charitable organizations. Patricia led her through her first meeting with Ethan, the decision to help with Lily's surgery, the subsequent involvement in their lives. Mrs. Hale, why did you help the Coles that night in the hospital? Margaret's answer was simple, honest. Because I saw a father who was helpless to save his child, and I had the resources to change that. It wasn't complicated. He needed help. I could provide it. Did you expect anything in return? No, I expected nothing. But you continued to be involved in their lives after the initial crisis passed. Why? Margaret was quiet for a moment, choosing her words carefully. I lost my husband 2 years ago. Before that, I lost the only child I ever conceived. I've spent a long time feeling purposeless, moving through a life that looked full from the outside but felt empty inside. She looked directly at the judge. Helping Ethan and Lily gave me purpose again. It made me feel useful. And more than that, it made me care about something beyond my own loneliness. Are you in love with Mr. Cole? Brennan objected, relevance, but the judge allowed it. Margaret met Ethan's eyes across the courtroom. Yes, she said quietly. I am. And Lily, what is your relationship with her? I love her. Margaret's voice was firm. She's a remarkable little girl, brave, funny, kind. Getting to be part of her life, her recovery, watching her heal and grow, it's been a privilege. Do you want to replace her mother? No, I would never presume to do that. Lily has a mother. What I want is to be someone who cares about her, supports her, helps her when she needs it, a friend, a mentor, whatever role she needs me to fill. Patricia nodded, satisfied. Your witness. Brennan approached like a shark scenting blood. Mrs. Hale, you're a wealthy woman, aren't you? I'm financially comfortable, yes. Your late husband was a professor, not typically a high-earning profession. Where does your money come from? Family inheritance, primarily, and smart investments over the years. So you've never had to worry about money, never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries, never lived paycheck to paycheck. No, I haven't. Must be nice. Patricia objected, and the judge told Brennan to ask questions, not editorialize. Let me rephrase. Would you say that your financial resources give you a certain amount of power over people who don't have those resources? I don't think of it that way. But they do, don't they? Give you power. When you offered to pay for Lily's surgery, Mr. Cole couldn't refuse without potentially letting his daughter die. That's quite a bit of leverage. I wasn't trying to gain leverage. And once you'd paid $250,000 for someone, they'd feel pretty obligated to you, wouldn't they? I never asked for obligation. But you got it anyway. You have a key to their apartment. You're there every day. You make decisions about Lily's care. You've inserted yourself into every aspect of their lives. Brennan's voice was sharp. Isn't it true that you're using your money to buy yourself a family? Margaret's composure cracked slightly. That's not true. Isn't it? You lost your husband. You never had children. You're lonely. And here's a ready-made family, a cute kid, a grateful father. And all you had to do was write some checks. Objection! Patricia was furious. Your Honor, this is offensive and completely inappropriate. Mr. Brennan, you're out of line, the judge said sharply. Ask your questions without the editorial. But Brennan wasn't done. Mrs. Hale, what happens if Lily goes back to her mother? What happens to your purpose then? Margaret was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was steady, but her eyes were wet. I would be devastated, she said honestly. But if that's what's best for Lily, if she's genuinely better off with her mother, then that's what matters. My feelings are secondary to what that child needs. Even though you've invested so much money? The money doesn't matter. It never mattered. What matters is Lily's well-being. So you just walk away from the family you've been building for the past 2 months? If I had to, yes. Brennan smiled, sensing victory. So you do think of them as your family. I think of them as people I love. What you want to call that is up to you. The lawyer changed tactics. Mrs. Hale, in your testimony, you said you love Lily. Do you think that's appropriate, loving someone else's child? I think it's human. Even when that child has a mother who wants to be part of her life again. Lily has been without her mother for 3 years. She's been without maternal figures in her life except for teachers and friends' parents. If my presence has given her some of what she's been missing, I can't apologize for that. But you can see how it looks, can't you? A wealthy older woman, lonely, childless, swooping in to claim someone else's family? Margaret's voice went cold. I haven't claimed anyone. I've helped people who needed help. I've shown up when I was needed. And I've done it without asking for anything in return except the privilege of being part of their lives. The privilege you bought with $250,000. No, Mr. Brennan, the privilege I earned by being there, by caring, by doing the work of showing up every single day. Money can buy a lot of things, but it can't buy genuine connection. It can't buy love. And what I have with Ethan and Lily, that's real, regardless of what you're trying to imply. Brennan opened his mouth to continue, but the judge interrupted. I think we've heard enough on this line of questioning. Do you have anything else, Mr. Brennan? He did, but it was mostly more of the same. Implications about Margaret's motives, suggestions about manipulation, questions about what would happen to her involvement if custody changed. Margaret answered each one with increasing certainty, her composure fully restored. When she finally stepped down, she didn't look at Ethan, just walked back to her seat in the gallery with her head high. The judge called a brief recess. In the hallway, Ethan found Margaret standing by a window, her arms wrapped around herself despite the warm building. You were incredible in there, he said. She turned to look at him. Was I? Because I feel like I just handed them ammunition. Admitting I love you, admitting I'd be devastated if Lily left, that's exactly what they wanted me to say. It was also the truth. The truth might not be enough, Ethan. Before he could respond, Patricia appeared. We need to talk strategy. The judge is going to want closing arguments after the break, and then she'll make her ruling. This could go either way. They huddled in a conference room, Ethan, Margaret, and Patricia, while the lawyer laid out what she thought would happen next. The judge is tough but fair, Patricia said. She's not going to be swayed by emotional appeals from either side. She's going to look at what's best for Lily, period. Our strongest argument is Ethan's track record as a parent. Rebecca's strongest argument is that she's Lily's mother and has a right to be in her life. What about Margaret? Ethan asked. How much will her involvement factor in? Honestly, it could go either way. Some judges would see it as a positive, a strong support system for Lily. Others might see it as Rebecca's attorney painted it, inappropriate involvement from an outsider. Patricia looked at Margaret. I'm going to be honest with you. Your testimony was powerful, but it also confirmed their narrative. You admitted to being in love with Ethan, to loving Lily, to wanting to be part of their family. For some people, that's beautiful. For others, it's concerning. What do we do? Ethan asked. We make our case. We remind the judge that Rebecca abandoned Lily for 3 years with no contact, no support, no explanation. We show that Ethan has been a devoted father who's built a stable, loving environment, and we hope it's enough. When they reconvened, Patricia made their closing argument with passionate precision. She walked through Ethan's 3 years of solo parenting, his sacrifices, his dedication. She highlighted Rebecca's complete absence and the suspicious timing of her return. She addressed Margaret's involvement head-on. Yes, Margaret Hale has been involved in the Coles' lives. Yes, she's provided financial support, but she's also provided something more valuable: stability, care, and genuine affection for a child who desperately needed it. The question before this court isn't whether Margaret Hale is Lily's mother. She's not. The question is whether Lily is better off in a home with a devoted father and a strong support system, or removed from everything stable in her life to be placed with a woman who walked away 3 years ago and only came back when it was convenient. Brennan's closing was equally strong. He painted Rebecca as a mother who'd made the difficult choice to get help, who'd put her daughter's needs above her own desire for contact, who was now healthy and ready to parent. He painted Ethan as a well-meaning father who'd gotten in over his head and allowed an outsider to take over his family. He called Margaret's involvement inappropriate at best, predatory at worst. The judge listened to both arguments without expression. Then she spoke. I'm going to take a brief recess to review the evidence and testimony. When I return, I'll give my ruling. I expect everyone to remain in the courtroom. The 20 minutes she was gone felt like hours. Ethan sat between Patricia and Margaret, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. Rebecca sat across the aisle with Brennan, her face composed but her hands twisted together in her lap. When the judge returned, everyone stood. I've considered the evidence and testimony carefully, she began. This is not an easy case. We have a mother who was absent but claims it was for medical reasons. We have a father who's been present and devoted but is financially dependent on a third party with her own emotional investment in the outcome. And we have a child who deserves stability and love, regardless of where that comes from. Ethan's heart hammered so hard he thought it might crack his ribs. Ms. Cole's explanation for her absence raises concerns. The lack of medical documentation, the failure to maintain any contact, the convenient timing of her return, these factors weigh against her credibility. However, I'm not prepared to say that a parent who sought mental health treatment should be permanently barred from their child's life. Rebecca's lawyer looked pleased. Ethan felt his stomach drop. At the same time, the judge continued, Mr. Cole has demonstrated consistent, devoted parenting for 3 years. He has maintained employment, provided a stable home, and ensured his daughter's physical and emotional needs were met. The involvement of Mrs. Hale, while unusual, does not appear to be detrimental to the child. In fact, all evidence suggests Lily has benefited from Mrs. Hale's presence during a difficult recovery period. The judge paused, looking between both parties. However, I have significant concerns about the current dynamic. A child should not be financially dependent on someone with no legal relationship to her. The amount of money involved creates a power imbalance that could become problematic. And while I don't question Mrs. Hale's genuine affection for Lily, the intensity of her involvement after only 2 months is concerning. Margaret's hand found Ethan's under the table, squeezing tight. Therefore, I'm denying Ms. Cole's petition for emergency temporary custody. Lily will remain with her father. Ethan's relief was so intense, he felt lightheaded. Beside him, Margaret let out a breath she'd been holding. However, the judge continued, I'm ordering a full custody evaluation to be completed within 90 days. This will include home visits, psychological evaluations, and interviews with Lily herself. At that time, we'll determine what permanent custody arrangement is in Lily's best interest. She turned to Rebecca. Ms. Cole, I'm granting you supervised visitation, 2 hours per week, to begin immediately. This will allow you to rebuild a relationship with your daughter under appropriate oversight. Rebecca nodded, tears streaming down her face. Mr. Cole, I'm ordering you to work with a family financial counselor to establish a plan for managing Mrs. Hale's financial contributions. This relationship needs boundaries and documentation to protect everyone involved, especially Lily. Finally, she looked at Margaret. Mrs. Hale, I appreciate your obvious care for this child, but I'm advising you to step back during this evaluation period. Allow Mr. Cole and his daughter to demonstrate that they have a stable family unit independent of your support. If you truly care about what's best for Lily, you'll give them space to prove they don't need you. The words landed like a physical blow. Margaret's hand went slack in Ethan's. This court is adjourned. I'll see everyone back in 90 days. The gavel fell, and with it, everything they'd built together. In the hallway afterward, Rebecca approached Ethan cautiously. I know you hate me, she said quietly, and you have every right to. But I do want to be part of Lily's life again. I'm not trying to take her from you, I just want a chance to be her mother. Ethan looked at this woman he'd once loved, once built a life with, and felt nothing but exhaustion. You walked away, Rebecca. You don't get to just walk back in and pretend those 3 years didn't happen. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Her voice broke. I was drowning, and I didn't know how to ask for help. I made terrible choices. But I'm better now. I'm stable. And I love her. I never stopped loving her. You have a funny way of showing it. Rebecca flinched. I deserve that. I deserve all of your anger. But Lily doesn't deserve to grow up without her mother if I can be the mother she needs now. Before Ethan could respond, Margaret appeared at his elbow. She looked at Rebecca with an expression Ethan couldn't quite read. Not anger, not even dislike. Something sadder, understanding maybe. Take care of her, Margaret said to Rebecca. Whatever happens with custody, whatever the courts decide, take care of your daughter. She's extraordinary. Don't waste this second chance. Then she turned to Ethan. I need to go. Margaret, the judge was right. You need to prove you don't need me, and I need to... Her voice caught. I need to figure out who I am when I'm not needed. That's not what she meant. It's exactly what she meant. And she's right. Margaret touched his face gently. I love you. I love Lily. but maybe I've been holding on too tight. Maybe I need to let go and see what happens. Don't do this, Ethan said desperately. Don't walk away because some judge who doesn't know us said you should. I'm not walking away, I'm stepping back. There's a difference. She managed to smile, though tears were sliding down her cheeks. 90 days, Ethan. Prove to them that you're enough, that you've always been enough. And then, if you still want me, I'll always want you. Then we'll figure it out. Together. She kissed him softly, quickly, aware of Rebecca watching. Take care of our girl. And then she left, walking away down that courthouse hallway in her elegant coat and perfect posture, and Ethan stood there watching her go, feeling like he was losing something precious that he'd only just found. Patricia appeared at his side. Don't worry, she said quietly. 90 days isn't forever, and the judge's ruling was mostly in your favor. We just need to get through the evaluation and prove what we already know, that Lily is thriving with you. But Ethan barely heard her. He was thinking about Margaret's face, about the pain in her eyes, about the judge's words, prove they don't need you. The problem was, they did need her. He needed her, and he had no idea how he was supposed to prove otherwise when it was the truth. That evening, he sat Lily down to explain what had happened in court. She listened with her serious 8-year-old face, processing information that no child should have to process. So Mom wants to visit me? She asked. Yes, twice a week, with a supervisor there to make sure everyone's comfortable. Do I have to? The question broke his heart. The judge says yes, but Lily, she's still your mom. She made mistakes, big ones, but she wants to try to fix them. And Margaret? Where's Margaret? This was harder. Margaret is going to step back for a little while. Give us some space. Why? The judge thinks it's important that we show we can handle things on our own, without Margaret's help. Lily's eyes filled with tears. But I don't want her to go. She's part of our family now. I know, sweetheart, I know, but it's just for 90 days. Then things will go back to normal. Promise? Ethan wanted to promise, wanted to tell his daughter that everything would be fine, that Margaret would come back, that they'd all be together again. But he'd learned not to make promises he couldn't keep. I hope so, Lilybug, he said honestly. I really hope so. That night, after Lily was asleep, Ethan sat in the living room that still smelled faintly of Margaret's perfume and tried not to feel like he was drowning. They'd won. He'd kept custody. Rebecca's petition had been denied. By all measures, this should feel like victory. So why did it feel like losing? His phone buzzed, a text from Margaret. How is she? He typed back, sad, asking when you're coming back. Soon, I promise. I miss you. I miss you too, but 90 days will pass quickly, and then we'll have the rest of our lives. Ethan stared at that message for a long time. The rest of our lives. Such a simple phrase, such an enormous promise. He fell asleep on the couch, his phone still in his hand, dreaming of courtrooms and custody evaluations and a future that felt suddenly, terrifyingly uncertain. The first week without Margaret felt like learning to breathe underwater. Everything was harder, heavier, wrong. Ethan went back to full-time work, arranging his schedule around Lily's physical therapy appointments and the newly mandated visits with Rebecca. A neighbor, Mrs. Chen from down the hall, agreed to check on Lily after school for a modest fee Ethan could barely afford. The routines they'd built with Margaret's help crumbled, and Ethan found himself scrambling to rebuild them alone. Lily's first supervised visit with Rebecca took place in a sterile office at Family Services, with a social worker named Andrea sitting in the corner taking notes. Ethan waited in the hallway, listening to the muffled voices through the door, his stomach in knots. When the 2 hours were up, Lily emerged looking exhausted and confused. In the car, she was quiet until they were almost home. She's different, Lily said finally. Mom, she's different than I remember. People change, sweetheart, especially in 3 years. She kept asking me questions, like she was trying to figure out who I am, like she didn't know me anymore. Lily's voice was small. It felt weird. Ethan reached over and squeezed her hand. It'll get easier. You both just need time. But he wasn't sure he believed that, and from the look on Lily's face, she wasn't sure either. The custody evaluator came the following week. Her name was Dr. Sandra Reeves, a clinical psychologist with kind eyes, and a notebook she wrote in constantly. She toured their apartment, asking questions about Lily's room, her school, her routines. She interviewed Ethan for 2 hours about his parenting philosophy, his support system, his plans for Lily's future. "Tell me about Margaret Hale," Dr. Reeves said, and Ethan felt his chest tighten. "What about her?" "The court documents indicate she's been significantly involved in Lily's care, but she's not here today." "Has that relationship ended?" "No, she's just giving us space, following the judge's recommendation." "How do you feel about that?" Ethan chose his words carefully. "I understand why the judge wanted us to demonstrate independence, but Margaret isn't someone I want to be independent from. She's someone I want in our lives permanently." "As a romantic partner? Or as a parental figure for Lily?" "Both, either. Whatever shape that relationship takes." He met the evaluator's eyes directly. "I love her. Lily loves her. She's become family to us." Dr. Reeves made a note. "Family is important, but financial dependence can complicate family dynamics. Are you concerned about the power imbalance created by Mrs. Hale's financial contributions?" "I was," Ethan admitted. "That's what the fight was about before the custody hearing. I was worried about exactly what you're suggesting, but I realized I was looking at it wrong. Margaret didn't give us money to control us. She gave it because she loves us." And there's a difference between accepting help from someone who cares about you and being controlled by them. "And if she were to withdraw that support?" "We'd figure it out. We did before, we would again." He paused. "But I hope she doesn't, because having her in our lives makes everything better, not easier, though it does make things easier. Better, richer, more whole." The evaluator's expression gave nothing away. "I'd like to talk to Lily now, if that's all right." Ethan sent Lily in and paced the living room, wondering what his daughter would say, wondering if she'd tell the truth, that she missed Margaret desperately, that Rebecca's visits left her drained and sad, that their lives felt incomplete without the woman who'd shown up in a hospital waiting room and stayed. After an hour, Dr. Reeves emerged with Lily, who immediately went to her room. The evaluator gave Ethan an unreadable smile. "Thank you for your time, Mr. Cole. I'll be in touch as I continue the evaluation process." That night, Ethan texted Margaret. "The evaluator was here today. Lily and I both told her the truth. That we love you. That we want you in our lives." Her response came quickly. "How did it go with Rebecca's visit?" "Hard for Lily. She doesn't know how to talk to her anymore. Give it time. They need to rebuild their relationship." "I know. Doesn't make it easier to watch." A pause, then, "How are you holding up?" Ethan stared at his phone, at those 4 words that carried so much care. "I miss you," he typed. "The apartment feels empty without you. Everything feels empty without you." 63 days left. "Who's counting?" "I am. Every single one." He fell asleep that night with his phone on his chest, like keeping it close could keep her close too. Rebecca's second visit went slightly better than the first. She brought a children's book she remembered Lily loving when she was younger, though Lily had outgrown it years ago. She tried to ask about school, about friends, about Lily's interests, but the conversation felt stilted, performative. Afterward, Rebecca asked to speak with Ethan. "She doesn't remember me," Rebecca said, her voice breaking. "Not really. I'm a stranger to her." "You made yourself a stranger," Ethan said, not unkindly. "What did you expect?" I don't know, I thought she'd be happy to see me, excited, something." "She's confused. You left when she was 5. She's 8 now. That's more than half her life you've been gone. You can't expect her to just fall into your arms like nothing happened." Rebecca wiped her eyes. "I know. I do know that. I just hoped—" She stopped. "The evaluator came to see me too. Asked me all sorts of questions about why I left, why I'm back now, what I can offer Lily." "What did you tell her?" "The truth. That I left because I couldn't handle being a mother. That I was drowning and I didn't know how to ask for help. That I ran instead of dealing with it." She looked at him directly. "I didn't tell her what she wanted to hear. I told her what actually happened." Ethan studied her. This was different from the performance she'd put on in court. This felt real. "Why?" he asked. "Why be honest now when lying would serve you better?" Because I'm tired of lying, and because Lily deserves the truth. Rebecca's voice was steady despite her tears. I've been thinking a lot about what that woman said, Margaret, about not wasting this second chance. And she was right. If I'm going to be Lily's mother again, if I even can be, it has to be built on truth, not some story I tell myself about postpartum depression and medical necessity. She paused. I was selfish, Ethan. I wanted out, and I took it. And I'm sorry. I'm so desperately sorry. It was the most honest thing she'd said since she'd reappeared. Ethan felt something shift in his chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of understanding. What do you want? He asked. From the custody evaluation. What outcome are you hoping for? Rebecca was quiet for a long moment. I don't know anymore. When I first filed, I thought I wanted full custody, thought I could swoop in and reclaim my life, my daughter, everything I'd walked away from. She laughed bitterly. But seeing her now, seeing how much I've missed, how little she knows me, I don't know if full custody is even possible or fair. So what then? Honestly, I'd like to be part of her life. Regular visits, holidays maybe, a chance to rebuild what I destroyed. She looked at him. I know I don't deserve it, but I'm asking anyway. Ethan thought about the judge's words, about giving Lily's mother a second chance, thought about what Margaret had said about not wasting it. Okay, he said finally. Let's try. But Rebecca, if you disappear again, if you hurt her again, I will fight you with everything I have. I know. And I won't. I promise. Whether he believed that promise remained to be seen. Week 3 brought a different kind of challenge. Lily's physical therapy had progressed to the point where she no longer needed the walker, but she was struggling emotionally. She was quiet, withdrawn, spending hours in her room instead of doing the things she used to love. When Ethan asked what was wrong, she just shrugged. Finally, one evening after a particularly rough session where Lily had barely spoken at dinner, Ethan sat on the edge of her bed. Talk to me, Lilybug. What's going on? She was quiet for so long he thought she wouldn't answer. Then, I don't understand why Margaret had to leave. I explained that. The judge wanted us to. I know what you said, but it doesn't make sense. Margaret loves us. We love her. So why can't she be here? It's complicated, sweetheart. Everything's complicated with grown-ups. Lily's voice was sharp with frustration. Mom left and that was complicated. Margaret came and that was complicated. Now Margaret's gone and that's complicated too. When does anything get to just be simple? Ethan felt the weight of that question settle on his shoulders. When indeed? You're right, he said quietly. You're absolutely right. Things should be simpler. And I'm sorry they're not. I miss her, Lily whispered. I know I'm not supposed to say that because we're supposed to be proving we don't need her, but I miss her so much, Daddy. I miss her too. Then why can't she come back? Because... Ethan stopped, really thinking about it. Why couldn't she? The judge had suggested they step back, but it wasn't a court order. It was a recommendation, advice about optics and appearances. You know what? I don't have a good answer to that. Lily sat up, hope flaring in her eyes. Really? Really? Margaret stepped back because she thought it was the right thing to do, but maybe... He pulled out his phone, pulling up her contact. Maybe we should tell her we need her here. That proving we don't need her is a lie because we do need her, and that's okay. Can we call her? Right now? Ethan hit dial before he could overthink it. Margaret answered on the second ring. Ethan? Is everything okay? No, he said honestly. Everything's not okay. We miss you. Lily's struggling and I'm barely holding it together, and this whole proving we don't need you thing is making everything worse instead of better. The evaluator. Screw the evaluator. Screw the judge's recommendation. Margaret, I love you. Lily loves you. And we want you here. Not in 60 days. Now. He heard her breath catch. Ethan, please, Lily called out, loud enough for Margaret to hear. Please come back, Margaret. We need you. There was a long pause, then, I'm on my way. She arrived 45 minutes later, still in her pajamas with a coat thrown over them, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked more beautiful than Ethan had ever seen her. Lily ran to her, actually ran, her healing legs carrying her across the apartment, and threw her arms around Margaret's waist. Margaret sank to her knees, holding Lily tight, both of them crying. "I'm sorry," Margaret whispered. "I'm so sorry I stayed away. I thought I was doing the right thing, but I should have known. I should have realized." "It's okay," Lily said through her tears. "You're here now. That's what matters." When they finally pulled apart, Margaret looked at Ethan over Lily's head. He crossed the room and pulled both of them into his arms, and for the first time in 3 weeks, something that had been broken felt like it might be healing. Later, after Lily had fallen asleep, exhausted from emotion but smiling, Ethan and Margaret sat on the couch, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "This might hurt your case," Margaret said quietly. "With the evaluation, if Dr. Reeves finds out I'm back, then she finds out. But I'm not lying to her. I'm not pretending we're something we're not." He turned to look at her. "We're a family, Margaret. Maybe not in the traditional sense, maybe not in the way that fits neatly into court documents, but we're a family anyway. What if the judge doesn't see it that way? Then we fight. We show her the truth, that Lily is thriving, that she's loved, that she has multiple people in her corner who would do anything for her." He took Margaret's hand, including her mother, if Rebecca keeps showing up, including you, including me. "A modern family," Margaret said with a slight smile. "The best kind." She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. "I love you," she said, "and I love that little girl sleeping in the other room, and I'm not going anywhere ever again. Judge's recommendation be damned." "Good," Ethan said, "because we're not letting you go." The next day he called Dr. Reeves and requested another interview. She agreed, sounding curious about what had changed. When she arrived, Margaret was there, sitting on the couch beside Ethan, holding his hand. The evaluator's eyebrows rose slightly. "Mrs. Hale, I wasn't expecting to see you. I know, and I know this probably looks bad from your perspective, but we needed to be honest with you." Ethan spoke carefully, clearly. "You asked me if I could manage without Margaret's support. And the answer is yes. I could. I did for 3 years before I met her, and I could do it again if I had to. But the better question is, why should I have to?" Dr. Reeves sat down, pulling out her notebook. "Go on." "Margaret isn't a financial transaction. She's not a convenience. She's the person Lily calls when she has a nightmare. She's the person who knows that Lily likes her sandwiches cut diagonally and won't eat green grapes, only red ones. She's the person who sat with me in a hospital waiting room and decided our lives mattered enough to fight for." His voice shook slightly. "She's family, and asking me to prove I don't need her is like asking me to prove I don't need oxygen. Technically possible, but why would I want to?" Margaret squeezed his hand. Dr. Reeves turned to her. "Mrs. Hale, what do you want from this relationship?" Margaret didn't hesitate. "I want to be part of their lives, permanently. However that looks, as Ethan's partner, as a parental figure for Lily, as family." She paused. "I know the court is concerned about my financial involvement, so I've worked with an attorney to set up a trust for Lily's education and medical expenses. The money is there, but it's managed by an independent trustee. Neither Ethan nor I can access it directly. That removes the power dynamic concern while still ensuring Lily's needs are met." This was news to Ethan. He looked at her surprised. "I should have done it from the beginning," Margaret said to him. "Should have structured it properly instead of just writing checks. I'm learning." Dr. Reeves made notes. "And what about Rebecca? How does she fit into this family you're building?" "That's up to Lily," Ethan said. "And up to Rebecca. If she can be consistent, if she can show up and do the work of rebuilding their relationship, then yes. There's room for her too." "You're comfortable with that? Your ex-wife being involved?" "I'm comfortable with whatever makes Lily happy and healthy." He looked at the evaluator directly. "That's all I've ever wanted, for my daughter to feel safe and loved and like she has people she can count on. Whether that's just me and Margaret, or me and Margaret and Rebecca, as long as Lily is at the center of it, I'm good with whatever shape that takes." Dr. Reeves studied them both for a long moment. "I'll include this in my report. The judge will ultimately decide what's in Lily's best interest." We understand, Margaret said. We just wanted you to have the whole truth. After the evaluator left, Ethan pulled Margaret close. A trust fund? When did you arrange that? During the 3 weeks I was gone, I had a lot of time to think about what the judge said about power imbalances and appropriate boundaries. She wasn't entirely wrong. Margaret looked up at him. I never wanted to control you with money, but I can see how it looked that way. This is better, cleaner. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, for all of us. Rebecca's visits continued, and slowly, incrementally, they got easier. By week 6, Lily was actually talking to her mother about school, about her friends, about the things she was interested in. Rebecca listened with genuine attention, asked follow-up questions, remembered details from week to week. She was trying, really trying. One evening after a visit, Rebecca asked if she could speak to both Ethan and Margaret. They met at a coffee shop, neutral territory, all three of them cautious. I wanted to say something, Rebecca began. To both of you, I've watched how you are with Lily, how you work together, support each other, make decisions together. And I realized something. She looked at Margaret. You're a better mother to her than I ever was, than I ever knew how to be. Margaret shook her head. It's true. And it's okay. I'm not saying that to be self-pitying or to give up. I'm saying it because I think we need to acknowledge reality. Rebecca's voice was steady. I was never cut out to be a full-time parent. I loved Lily, but I didn't know how to show it in the ways that mattered. The daily stuff, the consistency, the showing up even when it's hard. What are you saying? Ethan asked carefully. I'm saying I'm going to withdraw my custody petition, not the visitation. I still want to see Lily regularly if she'll have me. But the fight for custody, for primary placement, I'm done. Because it's not what's best for her. She looked between them. What's best for her is exactly what she has. You two. This unconventional little family you've built. And me on the edges, if there's room. Ethan felt relief wash through him, profound and overwhelming. There's room, he said. If you keep showing up. If you prove you're serious. I will. I promise I will. Margaret spoke up. Rebecca, I want you to know I'm not trying to replace you. I never was. I know. And honestly, I'm grateful that Lily has you, that when I couldn't be what she needed, you stepped in. Rebecca smiled, but it was sad. You gave her what I couldn't. That's not something to apologize for. They talked for another hour, working out the practical details. Rebecca would continue her supervised visits, working toward unsupervised time as her relationship with Lily strengthened. She'd attend school events and recitals. She'd be involved, but not primary. A mother, but not the mother. When they finally parted ways, Ethan felt like a weight had lifted. The fight was over. Not because someone had won, but because everyone had chosen Lily over their own egos. The final custody evaluation took place on day 87. Dr. Reeves had interviewed everyone multiple times. Ethan, Lily, Margaret, Rebecca, Lily's teachers, her physical therapist, even neighbors. She'd compiled reports and observations and assessments, and now she presented her findings to the judge. Ethan sat in the courtroom with Patricia on one side and Margaret on the other. Rebecca sat across the aisle with her attorney, looking nervous but not hostile. The judge read through Dr. Reeves's report silently, her expression giving nothing away. Finally, she looked up. I've reviewed the evaluator's comprehensive report, and I've taken into consideration everything presented to this court over the past 90 days. This has been an unusual case in many ways, but unusual doesn't mean wrong. The judge looked at Lily, who sat beside Ethan. Lily, I know this has been confusing and probably scary, but I want you to know that every adult in this room, your father, your mother, Mrs. Hale, even the attorneys, we all want what's best for you. We might disagree about what that looks like, but we all care about your happiness and well-being. Lily nodded solemnly. The judge turned to Rebecca. Ms. Cole, I appreciate your honesty in withdrawing your petition for primary custody. That shows genuine care for your daughter's best interest rather than your own desires. I'm approving a graduated visitation schedule that will allow you to build your relationship with Lily over time, with the goal of unsupervised visits within 6 months if all goes well. Rebecca nodded, tears in her eyes. Then the judge looked at Ethan and Margaret. Mr. Cole, Mrs. Hale, your relationship is unconventional. The financial dynamics are complicated. And under normal circumstances, I might have serious concerns about the involvement of a non-family member to this degree. Ethan's heart sank. However, the judge continued, these aren't normal circumstances. And from everything I've seen, the evaluator's reports, Lily's own testimony, the evidence of this child's thriving despite significant trauma, it's clear that Mrs. Hale's presence has been overwhelmingly positive. She's provided stability, care, and love. And the trust structure you've established addresses my concerns about financial power imbalances. She paused, looking between them. Therefore, I'm awarding primary physical custody to Mr. Cole, with legal custody shared between Mr. Cole and Ms. Cole. Visitation will proceed as outlined in the graduated schedule. And Mrs. Hale, the judge smiled slightly. While I can't grant you any legal standing, as you have no biological or legal relationship to Lily, I'm noting in my order that your presence is beneficial and should be encouraged. Margaret's hand found Ethan's and squeezed so hard it hurt. Additionally, the judge said, I'm recommending that you and Mr. Cole consider marriage, as that would provide legal protection for all parties and ensure Mrs. Hale has appropriate standing to make decisions regarding Lily's care. But that's a suggestion, not an order. What you do with your personal relationship is your business. The gavel fell. This case is closed. Good luck to all of you. In the hallway afterward, Ethan pulled both Margaret and Lily into a hug. They'd won. Not just the case, but everything. The right to stay together, to build this unconventional family, to love each other without fear of courts and custody battles. Rebecca approached cautiously. Lily, could I talk to you for a minute? Lily looked at Ethan, who nodded. She walked a few feet away with her mother, and Ethan watched them, ready to intervene if needed. But what he heard was Rebecca saying, I know I haven't been the mom you deserved, but I want to try to be better. And I want you to know that having Margaret in your life, that's a good thing. She loves you, and you're lucky to have her. Lily hugged her mother, and Rebecca held on tight. When they pulled apart, both were crying, but it was the good kind of crying, the healing kind. 6 months later, on a spring day when flowers were blooming and the world felt full of possibility, Ethan and Margaret stood in the small garden behind the community center, surrounded by the people who mattered most. Lily stood beside them in a purple dress, holding a bouquet of flowers, and grinning so wide her face might split. Rebecca sat in the front row, wiping her eyes and smiling. Patricia was there, and Dr. Morrison, and Mrs. Chen from down the hall, and a dozen other people who'd been part of their journey. The ceremony was simple. No elaborate vows, no expensive decorations, just two people promising to love each other and the little girl who'd brought them together. When the officiant said, "You may kiss," and Ethan pulled Margaret close, Lily cheered louder than anyone. At the small reception afterward, Rebecca approached them hesitantly. "Congratulations," she said. "Really, I'm happy for you both." "Thank you," Margaret said warmly. "And thank you for everything you said to Lily about me being part of her life. I meant it. She needs you. You're good for her. Good for both of them." Rebecca paused. "I know this is probably weird timing, but I wanted to ask, I'm moving closer. Found an apartment about 20 minutes from here, and I was hoping maybe we could do dinner sometime. All of us, if that's not too strange." Ethan looked at Margaret, who nodded. "We'd like that," he said. "Lily would like that." Because this was what family looked like now. Not nuclear, not traditional, but chosen. Built from broken pieces and good intentions and love that refused to quit even when it was complicated. Later that evening, after the guests had left and they'd returned home, to the apartment that felt too small now, but was filled with too many good memories to leave just yet, Lily asked if she could show them something. She pulled out a drawing she'd been working on for weeks. It was their family, done in crayon and marker, with all the detail 8-year-olds put into important things. There was Ethan, tall with his work clothes. There was Margaret, elegant even in crayon, with her arm around Lily's shoulders. There was Lily herself, in purple, standing between them. And off to the side, but still included in the circle of the drawing, was Rebecca. "This is us," Lily said simply. "Our family." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "It's perfect, love. Can we put it on the fridge? Absolutely, Ethan said. He hung it up with a magnet, this crayon rendering of their imperfect, unconventional, absolutely perfect family. And looking at it, he thought about that night in the hospital waiting room, about Margaret sitting down beside him when she could have walked away, about all the moments since then that had led them here, the fights and fears, the courts and evaluations, the slow building of trust and love and commitment. Sometimes the strongest families aren't born. Sometimes they're chosen. Sometimes they're built in hospital waiting rooms and courtrooms and quiet evenings at home. Sometimes they include people who share DNA and people who don't. Sometimes they're messy and complicated and nothing like what the world expects. But that doesn't make them any less real, any less valid, any less family. That night, after Lily was asleep and Margaret was reading on the couch, and Ethan was cleaning up the remnants of their small celebration, he paused to look at them both. His wife, his daughter, his family. Built from tragedy and choice, from showing up and refusing to give up, from love that didn't ask for permission or follow rules. Margaret looked up and caught him staring. "What?" she asked, smiling. "Nothing," he said. "Everything. Just thank you for that night in the hospital, for staying, for fighting for us." "Thank you for letting me," she said, "for choosing me back." Lily called from her room, "I can hear you being mushy. Stop it." They both laughed. Ethan sat beside Margaret on the couch, and she curled into him like she was meant to fit there, which, he supposed, she was. Outside, the city carried on with its normal rhythms. Cars passed. People lived their lives. The world kept turning, uncaring and indifferent. But in this small apartment, with these three people who'd chosen each other despite every obstacle, everything felt right, felt whole, felt like home. And that, Ethan thought as he held his wife close and listened to his daughter's breathing from the other room, was all that really mattered. Not the court rulings or the money or the opinions of people who didn't know their story. Just this quiet evening, this chosen family, this love that had refused to quit even when quitting would have been easier. They'd been broken, all three of them, broken by loss and abandonment and circumstances beyond their control. But somehow, impossibly, they'd found each other. And in finding each other, they'd found a way to be whole again, not despite the brokenness, because of it. Because sometimes the most beautiful things are built from fragments. Sometimes the strongest bonds are forged in crisis. Sometimes the best families are the ones you choose, piece by careful piece, heart by willing heart. And sometimes that's enough. Sometimes that's everything. Sometimes that's exactly what love is supposed to look like.